because that was a time when KANU went to the opposition. Therefore, we then, Mr. Speaker, I had a personal connection then with the president, even though I was in the opposition. And Mr. Speaker, my tributes to Mwai Kibaki, the late Mwai Kibaki, will mostly center around the time when he became president in the second term of his presidency. That was the most difficult moment for anybody to be president, Speaker. This was a time when we had a post-election violence. And I was appointed at that time Speaker to take care of a very difficult docket. A difficult docket in the sense that I had to be there to receive information about what was going on in the country, which was burning at the time. Mr. Speaker, I had joined the government ranks, and the rest of Rift Valley had been in the opposition ranks. And Mr. Speaker, it was difficult for me personally, because I was a minister and had to be many times difficult for me to travel through Rift Valley, my own province. And this is thanks to my being that time the chairman of Senator Mutua, Senator Wambua's party right now. And Speaker, that is how I ended up being in the cabinet. I was extremely grateful to have worked with the party leader, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, who happened to be a good friend. And during that time, most of Rift Valley was opposed to anyone being in government at the time. And just being courageous, many times I would drive through Eldoret, drive through very hostile territory to get home. But Mr. Speaker, when all was said and done, and President Mwai Kibaki handled the matter in his own style, in a style where he only was able to do it without emotions, without having to chest thumb or be controversial, antagonistic. Speaker, if those of us who remember that time, when he formed his government, he formed half of the government, and he left the other half unfilled, as if he knew exactly that it was going to come, a moment was going to come, when he would need to bring the country together. That is the gentleman we're talking about, that lies in state today in the House, in this Parliament. The Speaker, a lot can be said around that period, but when the Government of National Unity was formed, it's sometimes baptized in Swahili as Nusumkate. The Speaker, that cooled the temperatures. It's more akin to the handshake of today. The Speaker, it was very important for that moment that the president at that time, the late Mwai Kibaki now, would accept. I know, of course, there was a lot of effort. Some of my colleagues here were involved in particularly in negotiations that led to that. And if I'm not wrong, Senator Watangula and Senator Orengo were key on some of these discussions. And so we come to mourn a fellow who is a president, who is a hero in his own right, but on a crisis moment, like the 2007-2013 period, 2007-2008 period, he stood tall. He stood tall. And he actually saved the country, Mr. Speaker, which was going to burn and go to the dogs. Besides that, Mr. Speaker, when all had settled down, Mr. Speaker, our economy had hit rock bottom. There was no economy to talk about. The growth had gone below 1%. Mr. Speaker, can you imagine that the president then, being an economist, brought, by the end of his term, the economy had grown to about 7%. The highest ever. I don't think we've easily gone back to that kind of growth. But Mr. Speaker, I'm just saying this to set the stage, that in about a year, we've had to do this for a former president, former President Mwai, and now former President Kibaki. And I want us to understand, Mr. Speaker, that the Parliament plays a very key role in this particular process. And it's because we have made our traditions in such that the Parliament is a place for the former president, a retired president or a late president to lie in state. And now even the citizens have a chance to come and see their president and pay their tribute. Mr. Speaker, this is a tradition which, of course, we must have picked from somewhere, but it's a tradition that has been maintained. This is the third time we are doing it as a country. The first time being when the first president of the Republic of Kenya passed on. The second time, of course, was a year ago, more than a year, no, just about a year ago. And now, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like for members, as we pay tribute, that we personally come here to the House and pay your tribute to the departed president. And that's why I think the House Business Committee, Speaker, decided today that instead of doing the hybrid and people trying to pay tribute over Zoom, no, I think it's important for those who are seriously wants to come here to come personally and pay their tribute. That is the decision of the House, the Senate Business Committee. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask colleagues that we have 2 days or 3 days, two days to do this. And so those who are not able to come in today can come in tomorrow and continue with their tributes. We have until the body of His Excellency is removed from this premises, we'll continue to speak and pay our tribute to him. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to quote William Shakespeare in his play Julius Caesar, who said, "His life was gentle, the elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was a man." He was indeed a man of the people. He felt the heart of the nation of Kenya and captured her aspirations, captured and addressed the needs of farmers, small businesses like boda, without losing sight of the big businesses which make Kenya the economic. Mwai Kibaki, we never used to have this many motorbikes in a country. But once he took and the economy grew, Mr. Speaker, small business people started owning motorcycles, and you can see now what we have in business. In fact, Mr. Speaker, his policies were more mwananchi friendly. The late president, Mr. Speaker, also realized that the youth and women in the country were left behind and they were not empowered. And he thought, and which is right, because, Mr. Speaker, a good number of our founding fathers joined government when they were very young. Be still tapped for the young people of today and be utilized. The Speaker, the energies of the young people were then utilized. He appointed a number of them. He founded the Youth Fund and the Council, and eventually, Mr. Speaker, appointed young people to cabinet. And the women, Speaker, we know already, as you have said in your statement, Speaker, he appointed women to his first cabinet and also to his second cabinet. The late Mwai Kibaki is proof, or living proof, of how a fine person can work and be. He was a good boss to the people in his charge, including myself, as I have said, a loving husband to his family, to his wife, and a devoted father to his children. The character of the life he lived might be summed up in a few words. He was sincere, he was honest, and he was loyal. The Speaker, he was so loyal, he served President Moi until the only thing that made them part ways was the fight now for democratic space, which he, I think, as a last minute, he decided he was not going to stay forever in this government. So he moved on to the opposition. The late president, I remember, one who not only was cheerful of himself, but who gave much cheer and cheerfulness to others. He had a sense of humor and a gentle demeanor. He was bright, the Speaker. logical. He was systematic in his thinking. He was always willing to share his ideas and opinions on matters that were important to the nation. He was passionately interested in ordinary people's lives. And he would ask, when you met him, about the people in your constituency. And he'll always advise us in his cabinet individually, Mr. Speaker, and especially when there were things which were not going well, he would be interested in your affairs as a cabinet minister. In his career as a politician, he worked with passion, integrity, and zeal. As president of the nation, he led this country in such a way that he exemplified true leadership, Mr. Speaker. He gave all his energy. Mr. Speaker, you can speak of somebody who gives the energy, the whole of his energy, because when he first became president, Speaker, he was in a wheelchair. And he gave all that energy to serving the nation. He was always in his office, and he conducted his business even then. Mr. Speaker, many things can be said. A good number of us will be able to speak on and on about this President Kibaki. And now, Mr. Speaker, as I finish, let me just say in conclusion that as the Senate now resolves that the condolences of the Senate be recorded in honor of the President, the departed President, President Mwai Kibaki, as a selfless statesman, a national hero, an accomplished economist, and a member of Parliament for his contribution in nation building and Kenya's economic development, I urge members to be able to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to offer the condolences not just from ourselves, but, Mr. Speaker, from our constituents, our counties, and now on behalf of the people of West Pokot whom I represent, I want to give my condolences to the family and pray that God will rest his soul in eternal peace. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now move and ask Senator James Orengo, Minority Leader, to second. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the leader of majority in his remarks, and I stand to support the motion. And Mr. Speaker, if there was a summary of the person of the departed President Mwai Kibaki, what he was and what he did, I think your speech contains, Mr. Speaker, quite a lot of things that we need to know about this great man. And together with the speech that the leader of majority has made, I think the record of the House at the end, in our usual tradition, I hope, Mr. Speaker, we can prepare a volume of the answer to give to the family of President Kibaki. Mr. Speaker, as I said at the beginning, you have covered quite a bit about what Kibaki was and what he did. The leader majority has done the same. Talking about infrastructure, we know what Kibaki did in the improvement of infrastructure in this country, including some of the ongoing projects. We know what he did in the area of universal free primary education. It was like it was something unattainable, but he did it. And he did it in such a way that for the first time, Kenyans realized that actually even at the primary school level, government could be involved in building infrastructure for schools. I think a lot of schools over his time and period began to see changes in the infrastructure of schools and in the field of education generally. Mr. Speaker, also in the area of health, again, quite phenomenal developments during the tenure of President Kibaki. The other thing that I appreciated about him, and showing that government does not always to use the coercive instruments of state to make citizens do what they are, or carry out their obligations, was in the area of revenue collection. You remember President Kibaki pleading to Kenyans to pay tax and voluntarily. And I think there's a lesson to be learned by the Kenya Revenue Authority that using the coercive arms of the state normally probably is not the best way for the tax collector. Now, but Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about Kibaki, really the man, in politics. And begin by saying if there was ever a politician that loved Parliament, it was Mwai Kibaki. Mwai Kibaki enjoyed this institution. And you needed to be in the House when President Kibaki was addressing Parliament. Unfortunately, these days, Mr. Speaker, we don't have anybody in the gallery. But people would come in droves when there was a controversial issue to be discussed or debated in Parliament, and true to form, some of the best speeches will be made by President Kibaki. And whenever you saw President Kibaki, he used to address his Parliament in two components. He started by addressing the formal part of his address. When you saw him looking at the press gallery and the gallery, then, Mr. Speaker, there will be silence, complete silence in the House, because he did it effortlessly and very eloquently. And I think to his death, he respected the institutions of Parliament. Not Parliament as an arm of the executive. There are a lot of things that happened during Kibaki's time where he eventually agreed with Parliament. Although the executive were planning other things, he eventually agreed to take the position that Parliament took. For example, the creation of the, although it started during President Moi's time, but truly to have an independent Parliament by the creation of the Parliamentary Service Commission, and creation and enlarging the Constituency Development Fund, which it was very difficult, to do in earlier times. I remember when Minister Mwiraria was trying to move the budget, and there was a stalemate because members of Parliament insisted that there must be sufficient allocations to the Constituency Development Fund. And President Kibaki, understanding that development has got to go to the grassroots, instructed Mwiraria at that time that, that stalemate was totally unnecessary, and we were able then to begin to see the difference in terms of size, the quality of allocations which were being made, the Constituency Development Fund. And, Mr. Speaker, many times he came to Parliament. Remember when we were trying to have the grand coalition after the violence in 2007? He came to Parliament personally to convince members of Parliament and participate in the process of trying to bring peace to the country. And, Mr. Speaker, this was possible because the President Kibaki was always looking at the big picture, never looking at little things that cause differences unnecessarily. And if it meant agreeing with those that he didn't share ideas, but the big picture obliged him to come to terms because the country needed to move in a certain direction, President Kibaki would do it. And what I loved about President Kibaki, you get very few leaders. In fact, I am hoping for this Kenyan Republic to grow to a better democracy. I'm hoping that we will have somebody in State House in the character and in the style of President Mwai Kibaki. Because President Mwai Kibaki, I remember when people went to see him, and you had a long wish list. If it is something that didn't fall on, on his tenure, his responsibility or jurisdiction as president, he would tell you, you're in the wrong place. You're in the wrong place. Go to the people who actually have those responsibilities. And to that extent, and I hope all leaders will be like that, and should be like that he would listen, and if you're right, he would agree with you. If you're wrong, he would tell you off. The difference between that leadership and why it worked, that President Kibaki was prepared to listen to the other side, to listen to contrary opinion. President Kibaki never wanted people to tell him what he wants to hear. He would be happier with you if you're telling him what he needs to know. And if you want to tell him what he wants to hear, very quickly he'll tell you, wacha fitina, wacha kizungu hiyo, sema uko nje. And that is the problem with Africa. That's the problem with the third world, that we have leaders who never want to listen, who never want to entertain the contrary opinion. That's why democracy can never thrive in Africa and in the third world, because we all want yes men. We all want yes men. And the greatness of President Kibaki was that, even when he was in government, he would associate himself with those in opposition. I remember when we were the seven-bearded sisters, and we were not well regarded in Parliament, President Kibaki took upon himself to visit our constituencies. He went to Abuya's constituency. He went to Shibule Wasoma's constituency. In fact, I was to be the last person. The day he was to come to my constituency, President Moi, what is this political tourism in which the vice president is engaged in? I'd built a little house, because I didn't have a house at that time, hoping that President Kibaki would come to my home. But that was not to be. But he valued that friendship, because subsequently he came to Uganda, and he came to my village. And as president, he also came to Uganda when I was a member for Uganda. And there was a lot of criticism against Kenya about extrajudicial killing. And there was the meeting of the International Human Rights Commission to State House as ministers in his government. I remember the Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga was there, Minister Saitoti was there, Minister Martha Karua was there, Mr. Wako, I think, was there as Attorney General, and civil servants were there. And we demanded that the civil servants walk out of the room, that we wanted now to talk as politicians, to talk about Kenya and these adverse reports that were being made about Kenya. There was a chopper waiting outside State House. He was supposed to go to a formal function at Gilgil. And President Kibaki, just ordered, those top civil servants, including the Director of Intelligence, out so that we can have a discussion. And instead of sending the minister in charge at that time, he decided that we go as a delegation and accept the criticism that had been leveled against Kenya. And we went to Geneva to defend ourselves. I think Mutula Senior was also there. And to have people like Mutula Kilonzo Senior on your side of cabinet was something quite good, because he was very frank, even though he belonged to the other side. And I think Moses would support me in this, because Moses was also quite like Mutula Kilonzo Senior. And when we went to Geneva, and Miguna was also part of the delegation. And you can imagine the discussions we were having in Geneva after the president had allowed us to go. But what I'm trying to say, he allowed us, even though, because we differed with the position that the civil servants were taking on the question of extrajudicial killing. And when we convinced him, he agreed that we got to go to Geneva and tell the world the truth and what Kenya was going to do about it. Now, one of the things that I must say that happened to President Kibaki, which probably President Uhuru doesn't have, is that his first vice president, who was a brilliant Kenyan, the late Omalo Kijana, gave him a supportive role. He didn't call the president names out there, but he offered the president a supportive role at a time when he had suffered injury and was indisposed. And then subsequently, after the death of Omalo Kijana, it was followed by Awori, Uncle Moody, who was equally, gave him a supportive role. And he was not by any means a sycophant in that cabinet. And then you had Vice President Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, who had stood actually against Kibaki. He had stood against Kibaki, but he gave a supportive role. That's why Kibaki was able to achieve a lot of these good things. And when Raila and his team joined, and Raila as Prime Minister, and we were two parties, one which initially was in the opposition, but we were two parties in government. But I can tell you where Kibaki lies. He will tell you that when they were working with Raila Amolo Odinga, we had a lot of differences, even in cabinet. But as a government, he had a supportive role. And that's why I think in those 10 years, he was able to make those achievements. And vice presidents who do that tend to make it. Biden made it. Kijana Omala nearly made it. Moi made it. And Kibaki made it under very 3 months to enable, at least to finish his tenure. And you have seen since the handshake. And, my learned friend, Moses Wetangula, was really part of the handshake. It's only when people are thinking about power and the positions that people go their separate ways. But I'm sure in his mind and commitment, there's a lot that could have been done during this presidency, absent the dysfunction in government. Not everybody can be perfect. Even Churchill was not perfect. He lost an election. But they say he probably was the greatest, and yet came out to be one of the greatest prime ministers in British history. And he had many faults. And even after winning a war, he was defeated in an election. So President Kibaki was not necessarily perfect. He was working under a particular environment with politicians who make too much noise, with politicians who, at that time were brought up in such a way that, handouts was probably the most important thing to get from political positions. But President Kibaki told us, that is not the way, no handouts. Government can provide revenue to build schools, to build health centers, to build infrastructure, so long as you had the right people. And therefore, President Kibaki could not miss Speaker Kenneth Lusaka, because, Mr. Speaker, I think you're a man of many talents, but you needed a president who could notice those talents. And then he didn't have anybody that he could protect to the end, albeit what they had done. Who did not know that my friend Kiraitu and Murungaru were the most powerful people in government, particularly in the first 6-7 months. Yeah, but when trouble came, they had to go and sort out their problems. And President Kibaki was the first to tell them, just go and come back when you have sorted the problem. Some of them never sorted out those problems. Who did President Kibaki love more than Muraria? I don't think there's anybody who was as close to President Kibaki as Honorable Muraria. And I think that's why he was really made the finance minister, because of his closeness to President Kibaki. And President Kibaki all the time was watching what was happening at the Treasury. He needed a loyal friend. But when Eulogizing came, David Muraria had to fight for his freedom in the courts until his death, unfortunately. In fact, he died before the conclusion of that case. So we need leadership that loves institutions. Mboya said, a country is as strong as its institutions. I think many of the leaders we have had before do not respect institutions. Do not believe in the institutions of parliament, that parliament can differ with the executive. That is not part of the template of our work to always agree with the executive, even if the executive could be having an overwhelming majority in the House. Indeed, when we were one-party system, the most virulent opposition came, in Parliament during the one-party days. People like J.M. Kariuki, who are here. People like George Anyona, who are here. People like my friend Philomena Chelagat, the things they used to say in this house, some of the members here could never say them. And Martin Shikuku, of course, Martin Shikuku was the best of them all. People like Muliro, who could dare face the president, that we didn't gain independence to kill each other. That is when he supported the J.M. Kariuki report. He differed with the government. He was a member of the cabinet. He differed with the cabinet. And that's how he ceased to be a cabinet minister. But these days, these times, people tend to love parliament that is user-friendly to the executive. A country cannot develop when parliament does not play its role institutionally as required under the Constitution. You may win the day, but you may not have a great country at the end if we weaken parliament. If you only want courts, a system of courts that make decisions in support of the executive, you can never have strong institutions. In fact, the greatest democracies in this country have emerged because of strong legal systems, including the United States of America. Some of the most important decisions that we put in our courts were delivered in the very early days during the presidency of Jefferson. I can see my learned friend from Nyamira smiling. In the United Kingdom, where you had absolute monarchies, it is the system of courts in their many divisions that brought order in the realm. So we must believe in strong institutions. And I'm urging the courts that, whatever we do as an executive or as a parliament, please continue being strong, because if democracy dies, you will not have done something in honor of President Mwai Kibaki. And the reason why I'm saying this, there was a time when there was a big rumor, and it was not a rumor because it later on knew to be true, when everybody in the Kibaki government, the first Kibaki government, wanted Amos Wako out as Attorney General. It was quite a fight. People were being approached to be recruited in that position. But President Kibaki said he needed somebody who had learned on the ropes, like Mwako, who would tell him, would advise him, would be a true legal advisor. And I've seen, whenever you confronted President Kibaki with a position and say, Mr. President, you cannot have it this way, so long as it was right, President Kibaki would listen to you. He would listen to you. He was prepared to change his mind. Now, if you have a leadership that cannot be advised, cannot listen to reason, cannot listen to what the representatives of the people are saying, like ourselves, and they're the ones who wield executive power, then that is the beginning of the end for any nation. And I think this great man who is lying in state in the precincts of Parliament, it'll take us a long time to find a gentle giant like him who is a good listener and who would rule not with a cudgel. He will not weaponize the presidency to settle scores, who wanted to do justice for the country. I think that if ever there was a man to be honored, because many of them have gone whom we never honored. The great men of this country we never honored. And I think it is very bad that, in this country we tend to honor leaders who make it, unfortunately, like President Kibaki, to the top. But we have got many great leaders who suffered for this country. People like J.M. Kariuki, I mean, we remember them when it is necessary in an occasion, or we want to politicize, his life for our own good. We got the families of people like Anyona who really suffered. Or the lady called Chelagat, that lady in Parliament, when it was very difficult to say the kind of things she was to say. And, no Kenyan would ever remember Chelagat. Not even in the corridors here. You would see a picture of Philomena Chelagat, because we forget. At least if you go to the courts, thanks to Chief Justice Mtunga, if you go to what used to be dungeons there in the Supreme Court, where many of us were taken before, you will see a bit of the history of this country, not just about the judiciary. You'd see, events and photographs and paintings of people who contributed to making Kenya a democratic nation. So I'm hoping, Mr. Speaker, that as we remember President Kibaki, that one of these days, we're going to probably have a hall of fame here. Remember the Arguing Skodek of this world, a great barrister. Who remembers Arguing Skodek? You go to parliaments all over the world, people like those are remembered. Yeah, but here, I think the only thing is partly colonial history. You see pictures of people who are speakers here. And I'm not talking about Speaker Lusaka. But speakers are not by themselves the parliament. The parliament is us and everybody. So I hope, so I hope when one of these days when people from Bugoma are walking along the corridors of this parliament, they will see a photograph or a painting of Moses Wetangula, or Mutula Kilonzo, who in a few years has made a difference, or Wambua, who wants somebody to be number 2. Yeah, which level? Let me say something about it, because President Kibaki was also number 2. Yeah. Let me say something about this thing. At the end of the day, the exercise of presidential powers rests on the president. Rests on president. To treat the presidency as an arranged marriage, I think is wrong. And arranged marriages never really work. Never really work. Don't force yourself into a marriage. Never force yourself into a marriage. You'll be like being forced into a marriage like Marie Antoinette. Yeah, her mother arranged a marriage between Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI. And she found out that Louis XVI was not really a man. Yeah. I will not go to the details. But arranged marriages are just like that. May I believe that when you are a lady, a gracious lady, and you want to enter into a union, you make some kind of choice. Mr. Speaker.
You want to be informed, Senator?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Senator Chula Yako.
Thank you very much, my senior. This point of forced marriage only works if one party submits. I just wanted to inform my senior. The forced marriage only works if one party submits. So when one party has the potential to rebel, the marriage breaks down. That is the problem we have had in Kenya. You get into a forced political marriage, then one rebels. I think it can work if one of the partners submits to the other so that it fits what has processed our family. So I hope those who are forcing themselves into political marriage, one will submit. Thank you.
Vision is, sometimes is not enough. It's performance. I'm just taking a little bite on this ongoing debate that whoever is involved in that process, let ultimately, because I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, let me predict something. The next president is going to secure a 5-year term, depending on what he does in the first 1 year. And in the first and in the next 1.5 years, he can secure his second term. But if you have a relationship where there's dysfunction, you know, the president falls the moment you're sworn in. And Kenyans don't have space for that. People are actually suffering in this country. When I walk out there, I mean, they're suffering out there. Kenya, not out of our fault of the government or anybody, with the COVID pandemic and now with Ukraine, there are a lot of problems out there. And in order to turn things around, and a lot of things have been done, like building the expressway, but are we going to be able to pay for it amid rises in the cost of living and fuel prices? Are we going to be able to do it? And therefore, the next president, and I know who that person is going to be, and I can see him already smiling because he knows what I know, and he knows what I know is true, that from that very first month, like Kibaki, the very first month when the NAC government came to power, the very first month, and my friend Moses Wetangula was there, the very first 1 month, things were happening. And the public was having confidence. Kenyans were the happiest people under the sun because government was performing from the very first day of its taking authority in the land. And therefore, I hope that President Kibaki leaves us with a sense of goodwill in the nation. We have peaceful elections, and that we learn from his very rich legacy what we can do to turn this country around. And that's not to say, Mr. Speaker, that you know, he didn't have his faults. I, as a person, I had many differences with President Kibaki when we were sitting on the opposite side of the House. But he enjoyed a good debate. And the other good thing about him, he always stayed behind in the House here. He would spend hours until midnight. He had a famous tree there, which some of you know what happens under that tree. Yeah, but he would listen. He would be having camaraderie with members. And after a debate where you are having political differences, you are arguing against each other, then you go for a cup of tea or a glass of something, and then you continue the debate and come into a semblance of understanding. Let me finish my speech by saying my just 2 experiences with President Kibaki. One, whenever I used to talk to Kibaki about arguing Kodek, he could spend an hour talking about Kodek. I think that's the politician he admired most. And if you go to the Hansard, you'd realize why. You know, because Kodek liked humor, he liked wit, he was good on his feet, just like Kibaki. I remember one of the cases that Arguing Kodek did when he was defending. Those days, people would be arrested for loitering with intent. And Arguing's defense in court is that, you know, if you are a normal human being, you cannot loiter without intent. Most of the time when you're walking, you know, you must have some intentions of going somewhere. And Kibaki would repeat that one. But the other thing that I want to say that I remember him for was when we were having a final meeting at Harambee House in the presence of President Kikwete, Mkapa, and Kofi Annan. And he was there alone sitting with His Excellency Raila Amolo Odinga, discussing the trouble that had come out after the 2007 elections. And the only person who was called to that room was Wako as Attorney General. And Raila Amolo Odinga insisted that he needed his lawyer to be in that room. I was privileged to be in that room. And many questions were thrown around in that room, arguments. And when we reached some understanding, when it was suggested, and of course outside the president's office, you know, everybody who was who in government was standing outside, knocking the door, wanting to come in. And Kibaki would keep on saying, no, don't allow them. They're what a letter to fitina, he would say in Kiswahili. So at the end of the day, when an agreement was reached, I was dispatched with Wako to go to Serena and do a draft, which was signed that very day. Now, I can imagine that if we had all receded to our teams, the grand coalition government would not have been formed. But President Kibaki has a sense of saying, you know, wachana na watu ambao wako nje. And that goes for somebody who was seeing a bigger picture and what needed to be done at that moment. I mourn President Kibaki. I mourn with other Kenyans that President Kibaki goes down in history as one of the greatest parliamentarians, one of the greatest debaters, one of the best presidents, and one of the best academic scholar that this country has ever produced. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, I now propose the question, which is that aware that the late Emilio Mwai Kibaki, CGH, was the third president of the Republic of Kenya between December 2002 and March 2013, in addition to serving as the fourth vice president of the Republic of Kenya between 1978 and 1988. Noting that the late former president, Mwai Kibaki, had a long, illustrious career in public service, spanning over 50 years, where he served as a member of parliament for Donholm and Othaya constituencies for 10 parliamentary terms from 1963 to 2013, and as a cabinet minister in various ministries for 28 years from 1963 to 1991. Appreciating the late President Mwai Kibaki's work in setting the foundation for the Kenya's socio-economic turnaround and infrastructural development, liberalization of education, including introduction of free primary education, enhancement of the Bill of Rights, liberalization of media, including promotion of media freedom, championing of women's participation in politics and leadership, promoting environmental conservation, including sustainable management of water and natural resources, and deepening of telecommunication services, and overseeing the unprecedented growth in the banking sector, among other milestones. Further appreciating the late President's efforts at governance and institutional reforms throughout his public service career, that culminated in the promulgation of a new constitution in 2010 that ultimately ushered a new governance paradigm, cognizant of the presidential proclamation of Friday, 22nd April 2022, communicating the passing on of former President Mwai Kibaki, CGH. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the condolences of the Senate be recorded in honor of the late President Mwai Kibaki's service as a selfless statesman, a national hero, an accomplished economist, and a member of Parliament for his contribution in nation building and Kenya's socio-economic development. Senator Wetangula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for an opportunity to eulogize Kenya's best president ever. Mr. Speaker, Shakespeare said, "Some men are born great, other men acquire greatness, and yet others have greatness thrust upon them." Mwai Kibaki was not born great. He acquired greatness through sheer hard work, through a commitment to patriotism for his country. Mr. Speaker, we can say and identify those upon whom greatness has been thrust and how they are unable to carry the weight of greatness. President Mwai Kibaki, Mr. Speaker, at the time he left the presidency and the leadership of this country, was the longest serving member of parliament in the Commonwealth, having served his motherland for 50 illustrious years as a member of parliament. None of us will reach there. When I first came to parliament, Mr. Speaker, my role models in debate on the floor of the House included Mwai Kibaki, Wamalwa Kijana, Martin Shikuku, James Orengo, George Anyona, and many others. And of course, you can't leave out Kennedy Kiliku in Kiswahili and Professor Rashid Mzee. These were debaters on the floor of this House that anybody, even if you didn't agree with them, you could not but admire. During the times when budgets would be delivered, Mr. Speaker, Mwai Kibaki would stand on the floor of the House, and Senator Bogisho can bear witness to this, and for a full hour, if not 2-3 hours, and that time there was no time limit on debate, and he would bisect and dissect the budget from A to Z. And if he didn't agree with it, he will finish by saying, "Bure kabisa," and then walk out to go and have his cup of tea. I don't know of anybody that Mwai Kibaki violently disagreed with, even those that they differed in opinion. Mr. Speaker, I was given the privilege to work with Mwai Kibaki very closely. I was his Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs for 4 years and a half. I was then his Foreign Minister, and my duty enjoined me to be very close with him in whatever we did, particularly in matters foreign. When he came to power in 2002, Mr. Speaker, it's instructive to put on record that as the leader of the NAC coalition that brought together NAK, Ford Kenya, DP, and Charity Ngilu's then NAC, and then LDP, he chose the leader of our party, Ford Kenya, as his vice president. A man they worked with across Kenya, a man they trusted each other, a man they worked so well. Unfortunately, my party leader then did not live long enough to do what he could have done to change this country. Mr. Speaker, Kenyans will remember Mzee Mwai Kibaki as a man who came to the presidency at a very difficult time. The shilling was at its weakest level. The economy was in tatters like it is today. And many, many things had gone wrong. But when he left the country, we all look back with nostalgia. We all look back in amazement as to how a man could do so much for a country within such little time. When he came to power, Mr. Speaker, within the first 3 months, and those of us who are there, like Senator Bogisho can say, Kenya was rated by UNDP as the happiest country on earth, and Kenyans were classified as the most hopeful people in the world, because Kibaki arrived with a message of hope. He promised free primary education. Within the first 2 months of his government, Kenyans tasted the sweet cake of free universal primary education. And the enrollment in our primary schools just quadrupled. Children who had been hidden in the villages looking after cattle, working as house servants, all came out and went to school. To the extent, Mr. Speaker, that we had a 7 or 8-year-old man called Marube. Was he called Maruge or Marube? Who came out and went to school and studied primary education. That is how Mzee Kibaki will be remembered. Mr. Speaker, Mzee Kibaki was a president with a difference. Senator Bogisho and Orengo, he was, I think, left, who worked with him in his cabinet, can tell you, he never entertained cheap gossip or gossip of any nature. The only time you sat with Mzee Kibaki as his ministers, apart from those who worked with him like foreign affairs, was after cabinet when you would all be invited to a lunch. There was no group gossip where people walk to State House and ruin other people's names and ruin other people's careers and destroy them. I remember my brother Bogisho through those State House gossips when he was forcefully removed from Parliament. Mzee Kibaki never entertained that kind of gossip, Mr. Speaker. He was a serious person. You went to his office and there's no time you did not find him busy reading, analyzing budgets, analyzing reports from ministries, analyzing reports from international agencies. And at the end of the day, when you worked with Mzee Kibaki, Mr. Speaker, many people even started underestimating him, thinking because of his quiet demeanor, they could take advantage of him. And those of us who are close to him will always tell you, listen, young man, your biggest strength in your life, and particularly in your political life, is to always appear not to know what you know. That was his always clarion goal. Always appear not to know what you know. Let people think you're a fool, but you can see right through them. And that was Kibaki for you. He was a man who believed that this country had a potential to exploit. He was a man who believed in equity. He was a man who believed that this country, every corner of this country, deserved something. And even as he didn't go many places, Mzee Kibaki would always ask his ministers, you have brought this project about this area. What about those other areas? One of the greatest selfless conduct of Mzee Kibaki, Mr. Speaker, is when they finished the Thika super highway. And we went there and some excited civil servant said, Mr. President, we are going to name this road Kibaki Super Highway. Kibaki asked him, na kule hii barabara inaenda, hakuna majina. You know, he didn't want the grandiose of being named after everything. Everywhere you turn is so-and-so international airport, so-and-so high school, so-and-so. Mzee Kibaki did not entertain that. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, even as he was the best president in this country, we have very few things named after him. In fact, I would want to think that Senator Bogisho, as the leader of government business, you should bring some motion in this house so that we name some national icons, 1 or 2 or 3, and name after this great man, so that we also immortalize his name for the future of this country. Because everywhere you go, there is Moi, there is Kenyatta. I don't know if it is the first Kenyatta or the second Kenyatta, but it's Kenyatta all over, it's Moi all over. We don't slight them. They were named by Kenyans. But we also want Kibaki to have his space in the history of this country. Mr. Speaker, nothing can be remembered even more about Mwai Kibaki than his commitment to the peace and security of this region. It is through Mwai Kibaki, Mr. Speaker, that we created AMISOM to look after the challenges of peace in Somalia. We created AMISOM, we rallied our neighbors, and he entrusted me as his foreign minister to work with the UN, to work with the AU, to make sure that we bring peace and normalcy in our neighbor Somalia. When there was a flare-up in the Congo with the Banyamulenge, Mr. Speaker, he sent me overnight to look for Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the UN. And within 24 hours, Mr. Speaker, we had assembled in Kenya the presidents of Uganda, Tanzania, Sudan, Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, Nigeria, South Africa, the UN, and the head of the EU to sit in this Michuki Hotel, what's it called? Windsor, Mr. Speaker. And we had to bring together and put President Obasanjo and President Mukapa as eminent persons to bring normalcy and peace to Congo. Another president, Mr. Speaker, would have said, who cares? I don't share a boundary with Congo. In fact, there are 2 other countries in between. Let the burning burn. But he had that feeling for every African, that whatever happens in Congo affects Kenya. Peace in Congo is peace in Kenya. Instability in Congo can be instability in the whole region. Mr. Speaker, when we had electoral challenges in the year 2007, Mwai Kibaki demonstrated statesmanship beyond any comparison. We, in his side of government, who believed we had won elections, and some of my colleagues who are hardliners, would not hear anything like, let's engage the other side. But within that frightening period, Mr. Speaker, when the country was burning, Mwai Kibaki called me and told me, my foreign minister, can you run to the AU and call them to come and help arbitrate in what is going on here? And that's how we brought in President Kufuor as the chair of the AU at the time. That's how we agreed on the eminent persons of Kofi Annan, Ben Mukapa, and Mama Graça Machel. Mama Graça Machel of the 3 is the only one living. May the other 2 souls rest in eternal peace. And they came to Kenya, Mr. Speaker, and we had long, protracted sittings at the Serena under Kofi Annan. Sometimes things were not working, and when things were breaking down irretrievably, Mwai Kibaki called us and said, I'll take charge of this because leadership and leadership alone cannot let us burn our country. We must sit together as compatriots. This group of Raila and his group are not our enemies. They are our compatriots. That we don't agree politically doesn't mean we burn our country. Where do our children go? And we sat together. He then asked me to call in Jakaya Kikwete, who was not a member of the eminent persons, but who had taken over as the chairman of the AU from President Kufuor. Jakaya Kikwete came here, Mr. Speaker, and in 24 hours we were able to narrow the gap and agree to agree and have an agreement signed, come to Parliament, alter the Constitution, create the position of Prime Minister, and have the grand coalition government. Some of my colleagues, in fact, Mr. Speaker, our team leader, like the Honorable Mother Karua, did not agree with what we did. She even boycotted the signing of that agreement. But at the end of the day, we look back and say, the hardliners were wrong, Mwai Kibaki was right, because we brought peace to our country. And our country rediscovered its trails and moved on. Mr. Speaker, Mwai Kibaki respected everybody. Those who worked with him, like Senator Orengo has been saying here about forced marriages. You know, when you have a forced marriage and it doesn't work, you end up with what I told you here, Mr. Speaker, in the Senate, that you'll have a messy and noisy divorce. And you can see that noisy and messy divorces are happening because, Mr. Speaker, people have to respect each other. Even when you don't agree, you have to respect each other. And you can see, Mr. Speaker, that today we look back to what Mwai Kibaki did for this country. Mwai Kibaki left Kenya when a bag of fertilizer, and people like Senator Bogisho are farmers where they come from. A bag of fertilizer was 1,800 shillings. Today, a bag of fertilizer is 6,800. That is what Kibaki left us, Mr. Speaker. For the 10 years President Kibaki was our president, even during the troubles of 2007, 2008, there were no petrol queues in this country. We never saw them. Today, as we pride into mega projects, people are queuing for food, people are going hungry, people are queuing for petrol, farmers cannot afford inputs, the cost of fertilizer is unreachable, the cost of seed is unreachable, and everybody in Kenya, Mr. Speaker, is living on tenterhooks. This is how we remember Mwai Kibaki, that he never led our country to a situation where Kenyans started regretting being Kenyans. He made everybody proud. He made all of us look back and say, this, our country, is truly the giant in the region. When we had problems, Mr. Speaker, with Migingo, and Uganda was claiming Migingo was theirs, we said it was our island, and a lot of people started issuing very bellicose and belligerent statements. Let's fight, let's go to war. Mwai Kibaki just laughed and said, Kenya and Uganda have got too much in common to fight over an island. He called Museveni. President Museveni came to Kenya. They sat and instructed us to put together a team from Uganda and Kenya and resurvey the international boundary between Kenya and Uganda, starting from Kibish in the north down to the T-junction of Kenya-Tanzania-Uganda boundary. In fact, it's then that we found where Mr. Bogisho comes from, some of our international boundary beacons had been uprooted. We had to put them back without fighting, without quarreling, without doing anything. That is Kibaki for you. A man who believed in peace, a man who believed in the tranquility of this region. I want, Mr. Speaker, as I eulogize Mwai Kibaki, also to remember my brother Kalonzo Musyoka, who was Kibaki's vice president for a full term. That my brother Kalonzo, you did us proud because we worked together. I was your assistant minister in the first term of Kibaki, and in the second term, I was minister, you were vice president. We did a sterling job. We had no backstabbing, we had no endless gossip, we had no situation where anybody looked down upon the other in whatever situation we found ourselves. You've had messages here, my brother Kalonzo, from Senator Orengo and Senator Ayako, that you are in a marriage that is forced. Don't get into a forced marriage. You have many options in your life, my brother Kalonzo, including, but not limited to, engaging Kenya Kwanza. We are available to have you because we know what you are, we know how dedicated you are, how a patriot you are, and you don't deserve what you are going through. When you became the vice president of Mwai Kibaki in the most difficult circumstances, you are not interviewed to be given the job. You served for 5 years. You are Honorable Raila's running mate 2013, 2017. It now is most appalling, and this I address you, Senator Mutula and Wambua, that your party leader is now being demeaned to go for an interview to be a running mate. How can you allow this to happen? He was not interviewed to be Kibaki's vice president. He was not interviewed to be Raila's running mate in 2013. He was not interviewed to be Raila's running mate in 2017. What has happened to his quality, status, and stature as a politician? And Senator Wambua, I want to send you, tell my brother Kalonzo that in One Kenya Alliance House there are many rooms, and those rooms are available to everybody, including my brother Kalonzo, because we need good people to work together. Let me, Mr. Speaker, finish by touching on one or two things about Kenya Kwanza, sorry, the Hansard will be corrected. When those of you who have opportunities to read, and I know that many of us in Parliament are sometimes too busy with too many things, just pick the Hansard and read the debates of Mwai Kibaki. Pick the Hansard and read the debates of Martin Shikuku. Pick the Hansard and read the debates of George Anyona. Pick the Hansard and read the debates of Wamalwa Kijana. And you'll see that actually in Kenya, the stature of politicians is shrinking, and shrinking rapidly. Because sometimes you listen to debates and you wonder whether this is a kindergarten or a house of parliament. Because those leaders were patriots. They had their facts. They had their feelings for the country. And they stood and spoke well. And Kibaki is on record as one of the debaters who never carried notes to the podium to speak. He had everything scrolling through his mind and was never ruled irrelevant by any speaker. That is the man we are remembering, Mr. Speaker. And those of us who had the privilege to work with Mwai Kibaki, Senator Bogisho here, the tycoon from Nyeri, my brother Maina, Mr. Speaker Orengo, and Ochila Yako, I think he's here. Those of us who worked with Mwai Kibaki will remember that in him was a gift to Kenya. In him, we had the best president Kenya ever had. In him, the economy grew. Through him, Kenyans loved each other. Through him, Kenyans embraced each other. Through him, Mr. Speaker, tribalism was put at the back burner of our country. Through him, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans felt that they had a president to be proud of. Even when there was a disturbance after the disputed elections of 2007, we regrouped together and everybody recognized President Kibaki as our president, and Prime Minister Raila worked with him as our president. We sat in cabinet as our president, and for your information, Mr. Speaker, during Mwai Kibaki's days, we had cabinet every Thursday of the week to make the country move. Today, I don't know when last the cabinet was held, because when cabinet is held, it's not a secret. It is held, and Kenyans know that cabinet met, they made a resolution, it is made public. The constitution today even obligates that every cabinet decision must be in writing, must be signed, and must be sealed, and must be made public. We don't hear of any cabinet meetings anymore. The country is run by decrees. The country is run by a few conspirators, and the country is run by people who don't consult others, Mr. Speaker. This is a big shame. We remember Mwai Kibaki with a lot of nostalgia. May God rest Mwai Kibaki's soul in eternal peace. May my sister Judy, your brothers Jimmy, Tony, and David, with whom we traveled so much when we moved around the world with Mwai Kibaki, we wish you well, we wish you strength. Now you are total orphans, you lost Mama Lucy, you have lost Mwai Kibaki, but that's part of life. Kuzaliwa ni bahati, kifo ni lazima kwa kila mtu. We celebrate the life of Mwai Kibaki as one like no other. Some men are born great, other men have greatness thrust upon them, others acquire greatness. Mwai Kibaki, through sheer hard work, acquired greatness. We cannot say the same of others. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may God rest Mwai Kibaki's soul in eternal peace.
Before I call Senator Maina Ephraim the next, I remember when we went to brief him as a PS, no, you can say it. When we went to brief him as a PS in livestock, he asked us that these cows we have seen in Nairobi and the ones we are going to see in Mombasa, What is the difference? You are just going to show us the same cows that you have picked from me. So we had to change our program because now we had to think out of the box because hii ng'ombe tumeona hapa ndio hiyo tunaenda kuona huko. Senator Ephraim Mind.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand here to remember the memory of one of the greatest men that has ever been in this world. Mr. Speaker, Mwai Kibaki comes from Nyeri. He was the MP for Othaya for all the time he lived. The people of Othaya did not. True, he started in Bahati or Donholm. And finally, the people of Nyeri came and they fetched him from here back to Nyeri. And I'm saying for the people of Nyeri, they had total confidence in Mwai Kibaki. Even during the times of Mlolongo, Mwai Kibaki was among the very few people who had no challengers. Some of you may not remember what Mlolongo was. Now, Mwai Kibaki, I came to know Mwai Kibaki about over 40 years ago. And what struck me is how Mwai Kibaki was able to relate to me as a young man, and we kept together up to his final days. Now, for us from Nyeri, and for that matter for the whole country, we all know Mwai Kibaki as a great leader who always thought good of other people, a man who, in spite of his greatness, respected all the people who came around him and they appreciated him. And we have truly lost a great man. Now, as it happens always, I remember the words of Mark Antony, that I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Mr. Speaker, we can, the praises of Mwai Kibaki cannot be enumerated in any manner through any single speech. But the greatest of all is the character of Mwai Kibaki. As we stand today, we recollect the good times that he created in this country as the president of this country. But reflecting earlier, Mwai Kibaki, when he was Minister for Finance, he did a lot to actually improve the economy of this country, improve the lives of many ordinary Kenyans. But most of the many things that today we witness in this country, the major cash crops that have been put up in this country, from coffee, tea, dairy industry, the sugar production, all the other programs of cashew nut factories that were there at the coast, and the major other things, including even KMC for the pastoralists, were done when he was Minister for Finance. And Mwai Kibaki, as a Minister for Finance, working under Mwai Kenyatta, he foresaw the Africanization of the economy in this country, the Africanization of businesses in this country. And this is where bodies like ICDC were conceived and became actually the driving machinery for the African business people. Bodies today which have gone into actually a state where they are not serving their purpose. The AFC, which was formerly Agricultural Bank. All these bodies were set, through Mwai Kibaki as the Minister for Finance, and of course, through the policy of Mzee Kenyatta. And Kenya became one of the shining countries in the world. Now, Mr. Speaker, we also remember Mzee Kibaki. When he became president, he had a clear vision of what he wanted. And the vision he wanted was to see that the ordinary man of Kenya actually was improved their livelihood. The issue of the education sector is a big milestone that he brought. But in all this, what did we learn? There are many things we could talk of greatness of a man. But the greatest things that a man should be remembered about is his humanity, his human self. When we look at Mzee Kibaki, the fact that he conspicualized the issue of free education, free primary education, and in recognition that there are many children, and there are many children that cannot afford school fees, is a very great thing. I remember that then his Minister for Finance, Professor George Saitot, telling me that it was through the sheer effort and the sheer encouragement of Mzee Kibaki that that program had to take off. And many people did not believe that it would have taken off, but it did. Therefore, as we stand here, let's see a man who was so great that he was thinking of the future of the ordinary children who cannot, Mr. Speaker, afford to get to school. And he brought the system, which I must say, it is not running in the manner that it was running during the presidency of Mzee Kibaki. The other greatest thing that we should all remember Mzee Kibaki is being content with what he has. Mzee Kibaki, in spite of the many years he remained in power, as finance minister for many years, as vice president to Mzee Moi for many years, and finally as president, we had nobody has ever can mention anywhere Mzee Kibaki's name was mentioned in relation to what today we are referring as a glorious thing called corruption. Because we have designed a system today where you only become, let's say rich through the route of corruption. Mzee Kibaki, that is something that he has remained in the midst of all evil. He remained standing upright and pure. Now, I remember when he became president, he declared zero tolerance to corruption, Mr. Speaker. And truly to the matter, he did not spare even the closest to him. I had one time an opportunity when the late Kalisa Maitha came to my office, and he sent me. His whole purpose was to send me to Mzee Kibaki to convey that he was a bit upset that he was being pushed or some maneno with City Hall regarding some insurance, something. And I can say, when I went to see Mzee Kibaki at State House, it was not an easy discussion between us, because Mzee Kibaki could not understand how I was going to talk on behalf of somebody who is being, mentioned, and as we continue talking, me not realizing how the matter was deep in his heart, he actually, I've never seen him for once shout and tell me, go and tell that man that he must stop those habits. And then it stopped there. But I can say Mwai Kibaki was very clear. Zero tolerance meant anybody mentioned with the corruption, man, he had no time for him. Mr. Speaker, when I say this, I know the hearts of many Kenyans can be pained today. How many people have been taken or have been mentioned? Billions in COVID, billions, even in this house, governors coming here with impeachment, and nothing is happening. They all seem to walk out there, and then we are witnessing a country that is bleeding, where the economy is not doing well. Truly, we must commend Mwai Kibaki for being so clear-minded that the only way to save the country is to save it from these people, kind of scavengers, who believe they will be scavenging on the public resources, Mr. Speaker. And that's what made Kenya what it is. Mwai Kibaki brought a culture in this country where hard work, he preached hard work to everybody, and he preached that you don't have to steal to be rich. And let me say, the other most notable thing to learn from Mwai Kibaki is the fact that to be poor is not a question of what you have, or to be rich is not a question of what you have. To be poor is a question of what you wanted to have minus what you have. And Mwai Kibaki lived with content with what he had, and we all actually admire that kind of spirit of a man. Mr. Speaker, we also remember Mwai Kibaki as somebody who had the capacity to actually cooperate even with people he did not come agree with. And I want to say I have witnessed various incidents. And I remember one time I dared and I had courage. And I told him, I went to State House, and it had taken a year. When Mwai Kibaki took over, there were a kind of skirmishes between the former people who are in government and the people who are in his new government. And I told Mwai Kibaki, I believe, Mzee, I would recommend that it would be good you invite Mzee Moi for a cup of tea. And he asked me, sasa tutatuma nani? And I gave the name of Bishop Yego, and they started discussion with Mzee Moi. So Mwai Kibaki was somebody who appreciated any idea, odd as it looked. And that is one of the greatness of men. When we come to our area in Nyeri, there are things that we will remember Mwai Kibaki for. And one of the greatest things we remember Mwai Kibaki is that he actually managed to settle the people who had been chased out of the Mount Kenya forest, who are actually living under what is called the Chaba system in Mount Kenya forest, in Aberdare forest, and settle them in what today is called Solio village, some 15,000 acres of land. And those people had lived miserably on the footpaths of small rural roads for over 20 years. And they had been removed through some dubious, miscellaneous accusation that they could be harboring to some insecurity problems in where they were living. People who had lived in helping in conservation of Mount Kenya forest and the conservation of Aberdare forest, and today we see how the forests have been depleted. Therefore, Mwai Kibaki will be remembered by those people and all the people around Nyeri and Laikipia as somebody who came to their rescue for their livelihood, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the other most trying moments so I was a young man, was the time of J.M. Kariuki. And Mwai Kibaki had one of the hardest times, and he stood to his form as a man of his character. And I remember his words at the burial of J.M. Kariuki, where he said, even if it takes 100 years, the truth will be known. I want to say, Mwai Kibaki was a man who lived upright in spite of all the years that were surrounding him again and again. Now, we also learned from Mwai Kibaki things to do with the democracy, things to do with the rule of law, and things to do with the freedom of speech. During Mwai Kibaki's time, he took over and he actually liberalized the issues of the media to an extent which is very admirable today. And, from Mwai Kibaki, he did not mind criticism, and he believed that criticism was the way to actually improve a country, and you have to let people be able to air their views. And therefore, as we mourn Mwai Kibaki, as a country and as a people, we also remember him as somebody who actually wished to set up a governance system in this country, a governance system for all the people, as envisaged in the best governments of the world. In this regard, I want to say in this particular time of politicking which we are doing, let's remember Mwai Kibaki, and follow his example and ensure that in spite of the struggles and the bitterness that sometimes is developing and the temperatures that are developing, we should always emulate Mwai Kibaki and ensure that Kenya remains a peaceful country, and we see a peaceful election for the welfare of our people. And to me, I'm saying this sincerely because we have already witnessed the high temperatures, and they are going to get higher. And we should always remember that we are all one Kenya, as Mwai Kibaki showed when they shook hands with Mwai Raila Odinga, and Kenya became a one country, a united country, moving in good state. Therefore, I want to call upon the likes of my brother Wetangula, you know, in spite of the divisions that are there, let us remember that there is always shaking of hands. A country will be one. Fine. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm only calling upon Kenyans that as we go to the next elections, in the memory of Mwai Kibaki, let's ensure that we keep peace and unity in this country. In spite of whatever results that the elections will bring, let us remain together as brothers and sisters and carry on in the memory of Mwai Kibaki. Mr. Speaker, I must also call upon Kenyans and upon the government. As Mwai Kibaki had set an example that he will not tolerate anything to do with corruption. This country is bleeding with corruption. The billions that we are reading, and you know, I keep on telling people, a billion, which most of us have not seen, is not small money. A billion. Now, I'm just saying, if you put a billion in a house, and every day you take 10,000 shillings, every day you use 10,000 shillings, it will take you 267 years to finish the billion. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, when we are reading about the billions that are actually being spewed by individuals, 2 billion a day, honestly, let's remember the memory of Mwai Kibaki and ensure that those thieves that are stealing the money in this country, the resources, such that we cannot get medicines in our hospitals, we cannot, afford to equip our schools as they should be equipped. Mr. Speaker, the same people who are subjecting this country to high cost of prices of things, let us ensure, and I call upon everybody, let's ensure that these people are put in a committee where they belong, and Kenya starts being the country that we envisaged it to be. Let me also say, Mwai Kibaki, although he was a believer in the free economy, in the Parliament, I brought a bill, the price control bill, which was supported by the whole Parliament, and it was talking about 10 items, which today, even today, when I listen to Kenyans, they are crying about it. Maize flour, rice, cooking oil, paraffin, petrol, diesel. I enumerated 10 things that I felt government should be actually having a control on prices. Because I don't believe that we should ever be living in a country where common people cannot afford basic commodities. And, Mr. Speaker, in spite of the major opposition from many people in the executive, I want to say, to this day, I'm very grateful to Mwai Kibaki. He signed that into an act of Parliament, and it remains not effected. And I would call upon, in the memory of Mwai Kibaki, let that act be enacted, so that Kenyans can actually be given a certain price on unga, if nothing else, on rice, on cooking fat, so that every Kenyan can feed. Because some of us don't believe we should be in a country where some people go hungry when others are throwing food into the dustbins, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that is one of the things that I feel should be done in the memory of Mwai Kibaki, enacting that law which he signed. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that there is a lot that we learn from Mwai Kibaki. Some of us who have had time to share with him, personally, and also as our leader. And to the family of Mwai Kibaki, I want to tell them that what has happened is a natural thing. God is the one who actually decides when you are in this world and when you live in this world. And I take this opportunity to send my condolences to the family, to the children, starting with Jude, Jimmy, David, and Tony. And I, for one, as the Senator of Nyeri, and whatever else I'll be tomorrow, they can remain assured that they will always have me to do all that pertains to be done when they need my service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
May the soul of our Mwai rest in peace among the angels of heaven. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Mutula Jr.
Thank you, Speaker. First, Speaker, to the family of the late Mwai Kibaki, the constituents, the country generally, where he comes from, Nyeri, from Senator Ephraim, allow me to pass my condolences and that of my wife, Anita, and the people of Makueni on losing such a great one. Mr. Speaker, the young people like myself and others can only repeat sentiments of what we have had. We've not had the opportunity like Senator Wetangula, Senator Maina, Senator Orengo, Senator Ongeri, who had the privilege of working with this good man. Stories are told about this man. And I allow me, Mr. Speaker, to recall the sentiments that my late father shared about this good man. He said, this is one man that Kenya will miss. I don't know what he meant then, but watching him lying in this parliament there reminds me that of the words of Solomon, all is vanity. I hope our presidential candidates and the people who want to rule this country can learn some lessons about this good gentleman, Mwai Kibaki. Senator Orengo didn't mention that when he was Minister for Lands, and after assuming office, the first thing the mandarins of NAC government wanted to do was take away the property of Mzee Moi. And this good gentleman, President Kibaki, instructed Senator Orengo to deliver the title deed of Cabinet Gardens to Mzee Moi. While he would have taken revenge, and while in 2003, he had the power and influence to punish those who were in Kano at the time, Mr. Speaker, President Kibaki did not do so. We want a president who will not revenge. We want a president who will consider every Kenyan, those who voted and who voted for and against him as part of this country. Mr. Speaker, Shakespeare once said, "The evil that men do is written in brass, and the good deeds that they do are written in water." I'm not sure, Mr. Speaker, that the politicians of this country believe in what Mwai Kibaki believed in. We don't. Because he left a country that was less corrupt. We are very corrupt. There is actually a picture of something he said. I can't remember it offhand, but there's a very nice picture on the, is it 6th floor or 2nd floor of Arambe House, about what Kibaki thought about corruption and service to the people. It nearly appears like a contradiction that it appears in that place, because a lot of the bad things that have happened to this country, some of them have happened in that building. Mr. Speaker, I remember this president, after he left office, as a gentleman who I saw every other Sunday at the Consulate Shrine, where I go every Sunday. We used to go every Sunday. I used to walk there simply. And Mr. Speaker, I think that the future of this country, and I'm not quite sure whether somebody is going to write a book about this man. I'm not sure whether we will produce a man like this. But Mr. Speaker, a lot of things need to be written about the late Mwai Kibaki. I recall vividly the story about the Constitution told by my late father. Mr. Speaker, if it wasn't for Mwai Kibaki remaining firm, a lot of the people in his government did not want a new constitution. He just remained very firm. And every time they used to conspire, there's a word my father used, which I will not use here, and he sought for his opinion. He said, what the minister has said will follow. And it's through following the advice and what Senator Orengo is saying, listening. I admire this gentleman for his patience and listening. We are quick to judge, we are quick to anger, we are quick to punish our enemies. And Mr. Speaker, since I do not aspire to be a president, those who aspire to be presidents of this republic must borrow a leaf from Mwai Kibaki. He led a cabinet of 42, was it 42? Cabinet ministers. Can you imagine? ODM, Wiper then, ODM Kenya, and his own party. All these people, Anyang' Nyong'o, Orengo, Raila, him, and others were in the same cabinet. The current government is having problems with 20. Just 20. He led a government, and he found a process, and he believed in processes. We are going to miss Kibaki, I tell you. I recall a time when I was asked to speak about the BBI, Building Bridges Initiative. And I said, and I won't repeat why I said this, and I said, you're going to miss President Mwai Kibaki and what he did for us to get a new constitution. The constitution he promulgated in 2010 is untouched. so many years later. Why? Because he believed in processes. And we got a new constitution despite opposition to it because this man believed in processes. I'm saying, if we want to believe in the legacy of one Mwai Kibaki, we must follow process. Those who speak about ill-gotten wealth, I represented two people who, together with my late father, who were said at the time to be very close to him. One of them was a central bank governor, who was his economic advisor. When he was alleged to have committed crime when as governor of central bank, he went to him. He told him, Mr. Speaker, that I'm an innocent man. Mwai Kibaki told him, go and defend yourself in court. And true to his word, Governor Mulay was found innocent of the crimes for which cabinet ministers in Mwai Kibaki's government conspired to have Governor Mulay removed from office. The second gentleman from Nyeri, who was also his good friend, his name was John Munge.
What's your point of order, Senator Yako?
I hate interrupting my very eloquent present and future colleague, and who will also be your colleague, Mr. Speaker, in COG. He said that cabinet ministers conspired to have somebody charged. I was in that cabinet, and I do not want to say much because I'll steal his thunder. There was no such conspiracy. If it took place, it was not at the cabinet level, it was in the kitchen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Well, I know the people who wanted Mulay charged. One time I met one of them who was charged alongside him, and I reminded him, you charged Governor Mulay, and now you have been charged. I believe that the point is made. The second gentleman is called John Munge. He used to run Munge and Partners, a very good old buddy of the President. He was charged on a matter involving Eurobank when he went to his friend and told him he's innocent. He was then the KRA Commissioner General, and they told him, please help me. He told him, go and defend yourself in court. Of course, Mr. John Munge was found innocent. He passed on recently, may his soul rest in peace, but it exemplifies what I'm talking about. If the example of what Kibaki believed in was followed in the current government, a lot of people will either be in jail or in court with corruption. So I believe that as we bury this man, a lot of us are going to make sentiments that we don't believe in. Because Kibaki never protected his friends. Kibaki allowed processes to be followed. And since he was a good parliamentarian, as Senator Omogeni mentioned, he allowed Parliament to do what it's supposed to do. We must tell our presidential candidates, those who want to become presidents, that you must emulate Mwai Kibaki. Don't preach water and drink wine. You must believe in processes. Mwai Kibaki was sued. I remember when he appointed the county commissioner, Mwai Kibaki never lifted a finger. He said, yes, proceed. And I believe the next chief executive of this republic must be able to tell us that he will follow the footsteps of Mwai Kibaki in terms of allowing processes, because that's what this gentleman believed in. I cannot not mention, Mr. Speaker, the question of debt. This man left this country with no debt, or very little debt. And since we are eulogizing him, let's say the things as they are, so that somebody can learn a lesson. Was it because this gentleman, the Makerere student, was a good economist? Did the economist disappear soon after Mwai Kibaki? The answer is no. What he did
is that this good gentleman had an economic council, National Economic Council, ECOSOC, that advised him. That is the reason our economy was thriving in his time. That's the reason we borrowed less. And this is really some of the lessons that as we eulogize him, we must call it as it is. This country, I must say, has been mismanaged after Kibaki. I will say it for the record and for his grandchildren to read. Mwai Kibaki led a peaceful transition. If we don't remember him for anything else, he's a gentleman who handed over the sword of leadership in a manner that left this country in one piece. When I say so, I am speaking to the current president. This man was your mentor lying in Parliament. You must leave Kenya in peace when you hand over power, because there will be no other president. I believe that President Uhuru Kenyatta is going to do the right thing, as his predecessor did. Mr. Speaker, let me end and say that it's unfortunate that the country has lost all other presidents who have left us. It would have been nice, and I have suggested that in future, any president who leaves office must form sort of an elders' council where they can guide their successors on matters management of the country. A time will come when we'll have 5 retired presidents, or 6 or 7. We can't just let them go into their retirement. They should find an opportunity to guide, like it happens in America. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, as we eulogize this good gentleman, I pray that this country will have a peaceful election. Those like Senator Wetangula, who has said and spoken about my party leader, who deputized successfully the Mwai Kibaki, must remind that our Dr. Stephen Kalonzo, our party leader, is like Job. You know, the man is just going through trials. It's just trials. And a good Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, the peaceful man, is quiet. It's not because he doesn't know what to do or what to say. It's not because we don't know what to do or what to say. We are peaceful people. We are watching. All of you. That doesn't mean you take advantage of him or us. And nobody is going to marry us by force. No. We are going to do everything. We're going to do everything. Those who sit with him and those who advise him, we're going to do it, everything, doing it willingly. Willingly. Because this country is bigger than all of us. I think at some point everybody must think about the country more than we love ourselves. So we have taken your advice, and as usual, we are going to take notes. We are taking notes. Those of you who are inviting us, we are taking notes. We are watching you. I don't think you are just going to invite us and we walk in there like we are jilted. We are not. Thank you.
Senator Christopher Langat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for also giving me this great opportunity to eulogize this particular great man, Mr. Mwai Emilio Stanley Kibaki. Was a great leader and will be remembered because of what we can see today out of what he did. I want to pass my condolences on behalf of the people of Bomet to the family and to the Kenyans that this particular man touched their lives in a very special way. And I want to say that Mwai Kibaki was a great man, right from the family level, Mr. Speaker. So I remember very well that he worked with his wife closely when he was the president of this particular country. He even went ahead to protect his family by even making a press statement to declare that Lucy Kibaki was the only wife that he had. You know, it was great. And I tend to think that he set a great example to most of the people of this country. I want to say in leadership that he was an economic giant, that actually he rescued this country at the point of need, when we were expecting that everything was in disarray. Economically, there comes a time when Kibaki arrived as the president of this country and saved the economy of this country. He will be remembered forever. I want to say also that in education, this is the man that when he declared free education, free universal primary education, most of the people doubt if that would succeed. But it succeeded so much that I remember when I was in university, almost every student was researching on the success of free primary education in this country. Most of the people went back to school, as Senator Wetangula had said, including an elder by the name Aruge. Most of the people left looking after the cattle to go back to school, and today most of those people are working in various sectors in this country. So he gave hope to most of the Kenyans on matters education. As far as the infrastructure is concerned, the Thika Highway is a living example for the rest of our life to remember Mzee Mwai Kibaki. I want also to say that on fight against corruption, he set a good example. He could not even spare his closest friends. Whenever they were mentioned, he was the first one to tell them to step aside for investigation to take place. And many a times, those who stepped aside and they were investigated came back clean, though most of them also fell casualties. So I tend to think that he was a man who fought corruption by action and improved the economy of our country. On matters to do with health, right from the time he was the Minister of Health, I remember the health sector was so much improved, especially during that time when Nyayo wards were being established across the country. And the health sector was so much improved during his particular time. And as much as he was a pragmatic leader, he believed in action-oriented leadership. And I tend to think that is why he spoke less, and most of the work is demonstrated in action. And he was the president of this country, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say, as far as this character analysis is concerned, he was the most forgiving human being that I've ever experienced in life. All those who tormented him in his attempt to become the president of this country, everybody expected him to revenge when he came to power, and forge ahead and forgive them and even rescued their wealth so that they could continue well. So I want to say, when it comes to learning on forgiving our enemies, I think we get a lot of lessons from Mwai Kibaki. He was also very resilient. Remember, he suffered so much. He became the president of the Republic of Kenya while he was sick. But nevertheless, he led the country the right way. I can also learn to be a fighter, to getting whatever you want. He was a go-getter. He fought so many times to become the president of this country, And at the point where everybody was almost declaring him irrelevant in the fight, that is the moment he clicked to leadership in this country. So I want to say that his spirit of fighting will always remain as an example to most of us in this country, that there is always hope for those who are hopeful. He was a very humble leader and a very brilliant scholar that we shall always emulate him. So I want to say that Mwai Kibaki was a great leader, that we have a lot to borrow from him. And I want to say that for those of us who are still fighting, as far as leadership is concerned, we must always borrow a lot from him. And I want to say on behalf of the people of Bomet, may his soul rest in peace, and may he live forever in our lives, more so in actions that we can see today and forever. I still condole the family and the Kenyans, and may his soul rest in peace. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wambua Enokio.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to also add my voice in paying my tributes to a great man. Madam Speaker, it has been said, and I want to add my voice, that indeed the late President Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki had a checkered political career. I think he's going down in history as the longest serving member of parliament, having served, actually I'm being reminded by my leader here, Senator Wetangula, that is probably the longest serving member of parliament in the Commonwealth. Having served this country for 50 years as a member of parliament in Donholm and Othaya, having served...
there is a point of information, Senator Kio. Would you like to be informed by Senator Mbogo?
Madam Speaker, I will take the information.
Okay. Senator Mbogo Ochila Yako.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to inform my colleague that I think he is second to Sir Winston Churchill, who served for 51 years. That's the correct information in the Commonwealth.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I don't know, my colleague is not very sure. He's saying perhaps he is second to Churchill. So unless we get the facts right, Madam Speaker, I will stick to eulogizing my fallen president as the longest serving member of parliament in the Commonwealth. Madam Speaker, it will be remembered that the late President Mwai Kibaki successfully served as the fourth Vice President of the Republic of Kenya. He had a successful career in the cabinet in several dockets, including finance, home affairs, and health, just to mention but a few. He was a founder member and leader of a Democratic Party, a man who rose to be the official leader of opposition in Parliament and eventually became our president and served for 10 years. Madam Speaker, on my own behalf, on behalf of my family, on behalf of the people of Kitui County, on behalf of the people from the Lower Eastern region and the wiper fraternity spread across the country, I convey our condolences to our fallen president and the family of Mwai Kibaki. We say we condole with you. Madam Speaker, I want to say a few things about President Mwai Kibaki. I did not have the opportunity to serve directly under him, as did Senators Wetangula, Senator Ochilo, Senator Pogisho and Orengo and the rest of the senators that served under Kibaki. But, Madam Speaker, I am a direct beneficiary of the benefits of the good leadership of our fallen president. When I served in media, I was Speaker for 16 years, from the year 2000 to the year 2016, within which time the fallen president served as president for 10 of those years. As Speaker, we enjoyed real press freedom. It is during Kibaki's tenure that the media space in this country was expanded and journalists had opportunity to report on everything under the sun. In fact, it was under President Kibaki's leadership that we as media people boldly reported about the hills in government without looking over our shoulders. We took on cabinet ministers without looking over our shoulders, without being harassed. And we served under a president who believed and lived the principles of journalism that believe that a free media is a nation talking to itself. So under President Kibaki, the media enjoyed great freedom. Madam Speaker, it was under the leadership of President Mwai Kibaki that we got the Constitution of 2010. And, Madam Speaker, it shall be remembered that this Constitution has been applauded across the world as the most progressive Constitution of this side of the world. In the legislature, under the 2010 Constitution, we in this Senate are creatures of that Constitution. In the judiciary, we have the Supreme Court. And in the executive, we created the office of the Deputy President. Those are the highlights of the Constitution 2010, not forgetting devolution and all the good things, the Bill of Rights, all the good things that are to be found in our supreme law. And I want to say President Mwai Kibaki played a lead role to ensure that Kenyans gave themselves this wonderful constitution. Madam Speaker, the development record of the former president, our fallen hero, speaks for itself. The road network and this piece of road from Nairobi to Thika, the Thika Superhighway, has been mentioned in many places outside this country as a piece of really, really good work. Madam Speaker, we will not forget to mention the free primary education. And, you know, Madam Speaker, I draw a parallel without saying any bad things about anyone. I draw a parallel between the achievements of free primary education under President Mwai Kibaki and what is obtaining currently. You know, because President Kibaki inspired hope among people. When the doors were open for free primary education, people willfully took their children to school. Adults left their farms and trooped back to school. We all remember the images that we got from Olympics Primary School, where children from all over Nairobi just went to school. Madam Speaker, last year, I remember there was a government edict that chiefs and assistant chiefs are supposed to walk in homes to drive away children to go to school. Madam Speaker, if there is goodwill and if people see hope in what they're being offered, there will be no need to use government mandarins to force people to go to school. And the question that a lot of parents are asking themselves today, because, Madam Speaker, we have been elected to speak for and on behalf of the people that brought us to this house. A lot of the questions that parents are asking themselves is whether this free primary education is really free. There is still so much money that parents are supposed to pay for their children to access school. Yesterday, Madam Speaker, I received a call from a voter in Kitui, an anonymous call. And the caller was complaining, almost going to the Minister of Education, to make sure that if money was set aside for people to get contracts to build CBC classrooms in our institutions, it's only fair you pay these people. There should be no conditions at all. Just pay these people their money because they have done the work. Madam Speaker, there is a sector that must forever be grateful to the late President Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki, the boda sector. Madam Speaker, it is in the time of the leadership of President Mwai Kibaki that this sector started to grow its roots in this country. Today, Madam Speaker, it is probably the only sector that is growing. And because Kibaki planted the seed, I would ask the current and future governments to do what is right for these young people in the boda sector. This is a sector that has grown to a level that we need a stand-alone legislation and regulation for it to operate as a sector in this country. So, Madam Speaker, I want to challenge the government of the day and future governments to look into ways and means of making the boda sector a sector of our economy as an employer, as a contributor to the GDP, and as a means of just getting our young people employment. Madam Speaker, I'm hearing Senator Wetangula saying we shall do it. I don't know what he means by we, but I guess you can explain that better. The last thing, Madam Speaker, on the issue of President Mwai Kibaki. Debt. And this had been said by almost every speaker. Madam Speaker, by the time President Kibaki was leaving office, the economy was doing extremely well. The price of basic commodities was fairly affordable. Cement was going for between 450 to 500 shillings. Today, a packet of cement, I was in Turkana the other day, they're buying a packet of cement at 1,200 shillings. wheat flour and maize flour, by the time Kibaki was leaving office, fairly affordable. 50 shillings, at most 60 shillings. Today, 150 shillings. The cost of fuel, Madam Speaker, and this is the cost of fuel even when it is available, because it's not even readily available. It's become completely unaffordable. Madam Speaker, how much time do I have? Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, by the time President Kibaki was leaving office, Madam Speaker, I think our debt was around 1.2, 1.3 trillion. Today, less than 10 years, we are at over 10 trillion Kenya shillings. It's incumbent upon this government and future governments to cushion Kenyans against the high cost of living. Madam Speaker, on the fight against corruption, Kibaki, the president, walked the talk. And I want to mention this, Madam Speaker, very respectively. My colleague here, the senator from Bungoma, some people brought allegations against him that he had been involved in the sale of an embassy in Japan. And the president said, let him step aside, you carry out your investigations. If he is found to have been involved, let him go to court and he will lose office. If he is cleared by the investigations, we will return him to office the following day. After investigations and our colleagues was found to be as white as snow, when he got the report, Senator Moses Masika Wetangula was recalled to office. That is President Kibaki for you. A man who, when it comes to public service, there are no friends or enemies. It's the law that must take its course. Today, Madam Speaker, we have a lot of people of questionable character, people who have looted public resources, but they're still in government, serving at the pleasure of the president. Madam Speaker, our time has come that maybe we should emulate Mzee Kibaki and do the right thing for this country. Lastly, Madam Speaker, and if I run out of time, Madam Speaker, I'll ask for a minute, because Senator Ochilo Ayako and Senator James Orengo made reference to my party leader, His Excellency Dr. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, in relation to the leadership of this country. Madam Speaker, I want to make it very clear, on my own behalf and on behalf of the Wiper fraternity, that we are not offering any bride for any marriage. Madam Speaker, whether consensual, arranged, or forced, there is no one who is offering any bride for any marriage. I've listened to the words of Senator Wetangula with more than passing interest. He says they have opened doors. We have heard that before. Madam Speaker, what I want to make very, very clear for this country to hear and to know is that Dr. Stephen Kalonzo has served this country with distinction. If there is one man that we have to pay accolades to and respect and treat with the dignity that is due to him, that person is Dr. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. When he was Kibaki's vice president, he supported the government of the day with everything that he had. He made it possible for his boss to deliver services to this country. When there was chaos in neighboring countries, he took responsibility and a duty of care to help form and stabilize governments in the DRC, in South Sudan, in Somalia. Madam Speaker, if I were my leader, Senator Orengo, or my senior colleague, Senator Ochilo, I would perhaps address Dr. Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka differently. Madam Speaker, I submit.
Thank you very much. Ochilo, he has already cleared. To do what? To inform or to? The problem is that you cannot be out of order when he's out of the floor either. You know you are going to have your turn. Graft it around your turn. Sorry, you cannot be corrected when he has already vacated. I didn't see your click earlier. You should have clicked it a little bit earlier. Senator Maura Isaac.
Yes. I didn't say.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is a very important moment to eulogize the fallen third President of the Republic of Kenya, President Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki. And I start by reading a quote that is very famously attributed to him. The leadership is a privilege to better the lives of others. It is not an opportunity to satisfy personal greed. Another quote that is associated with our fallen president is that when he faced a challenge in the 1988 current nominations, he still won, but he said that even rigging has manners. And Madam Speaker, the shambolism that is associated with party nominations has been rampant across the political divide, and it has been used to deny the country of great leadership or people who have contrary opinion as and when this happens, and especially because even the turnout is usually very low to the detriment of good leadership. And I think at times, going by his assertion about leadership and rigging, is that then you've got to make a covenant with the devil. If you decide to rig yourself into power, and as it has been said before, political corruption is the mother of all corruption. That is the malaise that has affected our leadership in this country, to the extent that then we've not really gotten the dividend of our democratic engagement. Okay. I want to say, Madam Speaker, that personally, I stand here very happy because the fallen president, and you can hear the trumpets of the brass band as his body is being escorted out of Parliament, is that the president came to power on a wheelchair. This is very, very significant. He had gotten an accident, and he ended up being on a wheelchair as a result. And it's out of this, Madam Speaker, that President Mwai Kibaki promulgated the Persons with Disabilities Act number 14 of 2003 into law. That was a watershed because it enabled persons with disabilities whose bill had actually been in limbo in this parliament for 10 years, since 1993, to see light of day. And it is actually out of that that I myself, in 2004, under the leadership of my colleague, Senator George Ochilo Opondo Ayako, George Mbogo, I was appointed to sit in the first board of the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, a body that was created to superintend over the affairs of people with disabilities by ensuring the implementation of the very law that created that body. So yes, I am a direct beneficiary of the leadership of President Mwai Kibaki in 2004. But earlier on also, it was quite interesting because there was a very serious scheme to deny him to become president. Because when I first registered as a voter in 2002, I couldn't vote for President Kibaki. The reason is many names that started with O and M had been omitted in the voter register. And even at some point, I think Raila Odinga's name was missing at Olympic Primary School, if I remember, in 2002, December 29th. But be that as it may, he still went ahead and won resoundingly with over 2 million votes at 63% of the vote. And that is how he was declared president, Yote Yawezekana, under the NAC banner. It should be remembered that President Mwai Kibaki kind of became a president by accident. He had tried to become president in 1992. He became a good number 3, although in politics there's no number 2 or 3. In 1997, he became number 2, and then eventually he was a president of consensus because the then opposition formed the National Alliance Party of Kenya, NA in bracket PK, and it was a constituent party of DP, the Democratic Party, a party that he founded, NAC, SDP, I beg your pardon, and such other parties that came together. And later on, they were joined by LDP, led by the then KANU renegades, under the leadership of Raila Odinga and others like George Saitoti, may so rest in peace, Kalonzo Musyoka, and others. So he really got into power, and there was a lot of hope. Over 500,000 people, thronged Uhuru Park to see his swearing in. And there was a lot of desire to change this country. Indeed, I remember, as a young university student that time, there was a lot of hopelessness in this country. The economy was in the doldrums. And I remember knocking the doors of Parliament there, the Continental House, bringing my friend Martin Obiero Okumu to see his then Member of Parliament, the late Archbishop Ondieki, who had replaced our senior James Orengo as a member for Ugenya, because Martin Obiero Okumu, a blind man, I was his guide, was looking for school fees. And we were chased very badly at the gates there. We couldn't be allowed to be close to Parliament at that time. But it was good because we learned our lessons, although we went through college. Again, the benefits of a Kibaki government were again to have a direct impact on me, because student leadership was banned in all public universities, Madam Speaker. I remember at that time we could have been at the university as a vice chancellor in Moi. And when it was reinstated, I happened to have been elected as a student leader at Kenyatta University, one out of the 7 student leaders at the Kenyatta University Student Association, together with my dear sister, Gladys Wanga, the incoming governor of Homa Bay. So it was really that, gesture that those who had clamored for reforms at the university level, that they got an opportunity to exercise leadership under the new democratic dawn that the NAC administration, birthed, of course, under the leadership of President Mwai Kibaki. And I remember we led a protest against the then Vice Chancellor, George Eshuani, may so rest in peace. And it's out of that that also President Kibaki gave us a new Vice Chancellor, Professor Everett Maraka Standa, the poet, who, of course, ended up governing the university in a better way. So I am here standing as a direct beneficiary of President Mwai Kibaki's leadership. And further to it, I remember, with a lot of nostalgia, that there was a boom of the economy. So much so that many of my colleagues who finished school with us were able to get jobs within their first year, that they did not tarmac for long, because the banks were employing, they were hooking loans, there are so many businesses, credit was available, and it is that inspiration. In fact, I was speaking to Jimmy Kibaki, the son, this morning as I went to view, after I had viewed the body, that is the inspiration of the Kenya Kwanza, the UDA, a bottom-up economic model. that you can actually stimulate the economy from the bottom up and create many opportunities for so many millions of people. And it is very, very well documented in terms of macroeconomics. That's the only way you can ensure a country has been able to rise again. But if you have a very constricted economy, with very few people at the top, I think it's very, very, very serious that then you create a lot of poverty. And I've just come from a very fractious and engaging, grueling campaign process, and the levels of poverty that have been created in the last 10 years, it's horrible. It's horrible, Madam Speaker. We have actually regulated so many people in the doldrums of poverty. And that is not what our government should do. It's a total failure. When President Kibaki left office, he left the country with a public debt of 1.8 trillion because he borrowed very well every year about 200 billion for infrastructure projects. And at that point in time, the economy was financed locally, domestically, at 93% of the GDP. We were only borrowing about 6%. Today, all of our development budget is borrowed because of poor fiscal economic strategy. When he was there in power, I remember as a young, public servant, at a very young age of 22 years, having gotten my first government appointment, we used to practice what you call the medium-term expenditure framework. This was a 3-year budgeting cycle so that you would know your resource envelope 3 years in advance in terms of it was incremental. Today, it's yearly, and about 8,000 government projects have yet to be implemented because they are whimsical. And I remember the president saying, when he took over power in 2003, that the country shall not be led under the whims of an individual. He believed in the rule of law. And as a result, Madam Speaker, he promulgated the new constitution in 2010. He never felt the embarrassment as to the loss in 2005 no referendum that he lost actually to his erstwhile political nemesis in government and allies, led by Raila Odinga. He still kept the fire burning. And it is actually rumored and documented, actually ready to relinquish power because he was a Democrat in 2007 until some forces prevailed upon him. And of course, there was the Grand Coalition government. But even then, he was very witty, an intelligent man, because when he constituted his first cabinet, he only appointed 17 members of the cabinet, I can remember very well, and left the other 17 to the then opposition. Even if the cabinet later on was, increased to 42 odd members, so that then we could be able to have ODM and PNU coalition, get into power. He's a president who never really, glorified himself. He removed his face from the currency even before this current constitution so provided. The only currency that bears his portrait is a 40 bob, coin, just because it was a new one. But otherwise, he refused to have himself named after every other thing that he launched. And for that, we remain grateful to him. In fact, even as recently as I think 1 or 2 years ago, he was approached to have the Odaya Referral Hospital named after him, but he actually recommended it be named Kenyatta National Hospital Annex. That's a great man. I think all of us would run at the slightest opportunity to name anything after ourselves because we feel that is the only way we can be remembered. So President Mwai Kibaki, the great economist, the great orator, who I think in 1982 was named in the Times magazine as one of the 100 greatest leaders. For sure, he lived up to this expectation. At some point, of course, people were disillusioned with his leadership because maybe in the way in which he spoke. I think he was very intelligent because people may have taken him for a fool because of the manner he presented himself in public, but that made him to survive the longest. He survived many people. At some point, he was called a perennial fence-sitter. In fact, he was called a general kigwea, but he finished last and he finished strong. I am happy that if you look at the biblical years of 70 years, he actually became president at the age of 72. And so therefore, he has lived his life to the full at the age of 90, almost 91, to see to it even that his successors, almost at the tail end of his successor, President Uhuru Kenyatta, who he also happened to have had the privilege of being his godfather upon his baptism. So President Mwai Kibaki
then was a star, because that is to mean the first President Jomo Kenyatta must have identified that he had a great future as to occasional situation where he would be the godfather of his own son. So this is a great man from the word go. Not a typical politician per se. He borders on the academic, Madam Professor Speaker, because you see he was plucked from Makerere University. In fact, very interestingly, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was impressed by the manifesto of the then ruling party under Milton Obote in Uganda. And he asked, you have a very good manifesto. He said, actually, it's not us who did it. There's a young Kenyan in Makerere who did it. It happened to be Mwai Kibaki. So Mwai Kibaki is the one who had actually made the manifesto of the then ruling party, for Milton Obote's government. And that is how Jomo Kenyatta, Jaramogi Oginga, I beg your pardon, was able to invite him to become the executive officer of the then Kano party, and he rose to become, an executive officer stroke permanent secretary, and he rose from there up. He's a man we can see who was able to change with the times. When he couldn't secure Donholm, Bahati that time, he moved to Nyeri, and he formed his base very well. When he couldn't take it in, I think he still stayed there and waited for the opportune moment to start his DP party. I can imagine the embarrassment he went through when he had to be dropped as the vice president, and he was still retained in cabinet as Minister for Health. It must have been a very trying moment. He stayed for 10 good years in the opposition. I wonder whether he would have become a good president, Madam Speaker, had he not stayed in the opposition for those 10 good years. I think it's a question of seasoning. So that then, by the time he became president, then he knew the suffering of Kenyans, because if you live in this bubble of leadership after leadership, you may actually be bereft of the realities of the people that you want to lead. So I think he was meant for the moment. I'm afraid under the Jubilee administration that I have served and I've campaigned very seriously for, we've rolled back the economic gains that he had made. If we had continued with that legacy, we've actually we've eaten it off, and we are about 15 years back where we were before. Yes, indeed, there is a question of whether the issue of devolution and an expanded government, the 2 tiers of government, then is a reason. I beg to differ, because I remember President Kibaki struggling with the new governors led by Alfred Mutua and others who were then vocal, by him insisting that we are a unitary government. It's only that in the expansionist empire building behavior of public servants, we didn't scale down what had been devolved as to occasion a reduction of government expenditure at the national level. Why, for example, today would 98 billion be used at the national headquarters of the Ministry of actually opened up with public universities to in a very big way. And it's out of that we have had so many people graduate. The quality may be arguable, but at least today, so many people have gotten degrees that they would not have otherwise gotten. So he was very futuristic in terms of education. And as someone may have said earlier on, Kimani Maruge, an 84-year-old man, showed up in school. In fact, Bill Clinton, former president of America, when he was asked who he wanted to meet, he said, I want to meet Mwai Kibaki. Because when he became president, he actually provided free education, and a million children showed up in classroom, in school. And he came all the way from America to come and have a chat with President Mwai Kibaki. I also remember him being hosted in Washington by the then President George Bush. It was very, very important that the Democratic Party leader was an icon of democracy. Is a man that even if we look at the current celebrations, they are not overrated and are being outdone like the way it has been done before on other people. And that in itself, that mien, that quiet, demeanor is very, very important. I was speaking to Jimmy Kibaki today, and he told me that it is the first time that he's stepping in Parliament today, for the first time, this time, because even when his father had served here for 10 terms, 50 years, he never allowed public service to be mixed with family. And that's the reason why that even he stayed at State House, so that he could have more time with his family, and so that grandchildren could visit him. So he separated family and public office, something that maybe some of us are not very good at doing. And it's a lesson that we may want to learn from him, so there's some form of stability going forward. So, Madam Speaker, I stand here tall, happy that we have a role model that we can look up to, someone who put the country first, and he was paid for it. The journey was arduous, it was treacherous. He had to really wait for so long to become president. He was bypassed by so many people who looked better and good than him, but still, the hand of God still made sure that he became the best president that I can say confidently here, out of the 4 presidents, he shines, he stands tall, he's a man who really, should be emulated. I want to end by a story that I read, a friend of mine was telling me about, that he was a policeman at State House, but he had taken a whole night watching football and he was fatigued. And he decided to sleep in a banana plantation at State House, one of the quarters, because it's a big piece of land. And then when he was sleeping, he only woke up when somebody tapped on him, only to find the commander-in-chief was asking, oh, where unajificha hapa? And they had a very good conversation, but he still let him to go and asked him, are you happy because I have increased the salary for the policemen? He made a lot of police reforms. And finally, Madam Speaker, the 2010 Constitution that he promulgated, that has mentioned persons with disabilities 18 times, is the same Constitution that has enabled me to stand here today, first in the 11th Parliament as a nominated member of the National Assembly, and today as a nominated senator. It is the same Constitution, when I was being illegally removed from the Senate, that defended me under the rule of law, and after 7 months I was able to come back to finish my term. I thank God for President Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki, a great man who lived in this country. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Honorable Senators, we still have 5 members, and we have slightly less than an hour. I'm just saying that because there was no limitation that was given at the beginning, so we cannot start limitation now. But I want you to be conscious so that you be fair to one another. Senator Halaga of Shiro Soka.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to eulogize our 3rd president, President Emilio Mwai Kibaki. And as we grieve for our 3rd president, His Excellency Emilio Mwai Kibaki, we should honor his memory and celebrate his life, which life is really rich in family, but more importantly, even rich in achievements. His towering achievements, Madam Speaker, have been spoken about by everybody here in this House. But for some of us that come from Northern Kenya, I think if we were to list some of the things that the 3rd president achieved, would be so proud as to say that he linked us to Kenya proper. How did he link us to Kenya proper? There was a time that beyond Isiolo, which is my county, you could not really come beyond Isiolo going towards Marsabit County. There were no roads at all. But during Kibaki's tenure as the 3rd president of the Republic of Kenya, he connected the Great North to what we had previously called ourselves not Kenyans proper. So we honor his life, we honor his legacy of towering achievements that has been said by all of the colleagues, from education, free primary education, to expanded higher education, to great infrastructural developments that today our economy runs on, to a lot of other things that he did in this country. We celebrate his life. And as I said, it's a life really that boasts of towering achievement. Madam Speaker, the grief of any person is felt most by the family. But a country constitutes a larger extended family too. So we also as Kenyans grieve for the loss of our 3rd president, but we are more in celebration because of the kind of leadership he showed us, a leadership that lived within its means. And that is why everybody who stood up to speak today spoke of him having not borrowed, or having borrowed and used it wisely. He believed that every citizen, including himself, must live within their means. And that showed very clearly in his legacy as a president that had the least debt, so to speak. And at the same time, the towering achievements that he achieved were then investments that were made very prudently, very cautiously, and with priority and focused strategic direction. Madam Speaker, our president had a distinguished career, as had been mentioned, of 50 years, from 1963 all the way to 2013. Leadership is given by God. Therefore, as they'd say in the Quran and in the Bible, that he is an anointed one, in the sense that you cannot have somebody lead for so many years. It's not to say that he's not had challenges or shortcomings, but he has led this country and has served and had the privilege of serving this country in very many capacities, in all of which he excelled. Madam Speaker, when our third president did not expect results from what he knew, he expected results from what he did. Because one of the things we make a mistake of, and especially those of us that are younger make a mistake, we think we know a lot, we studied a lot, and we expect the knowledge we have to give us achievements and results. But leadership is action. And he believed in action. He actioned. He made roads, he made schools, he gave free primary education, he promulgated a new constitution. He did all these things because he knew that you don't get results from just what you know. And boy, he knew a lot. He was so smart. He's an economist. He, as you were told, that he's the person that was behind some of the manifestos in Africa that were really one of the best at the time. But he actioned, and he practiced leadership as action. And for that, what a great mentor he has been for the youth of this country. Personally, I've had the privilege of working for the president as a youth. When he conceived the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, he didn't give to old people to execute it. He gave it to the young people, myself included, to go and put meat to it. We sat down. We didn't have an office. We sat down and created what today is a Youth Enterprise Development Fund. And when we brought to him with a very small amount, because in our little minds we thought 300 million is a lot of money, or 1 billion is a lot of money, and he said, what kind of money is that? I quickly, in fact, said, we can reduce it to 200 million, because in my mind then, that was a lot of money. He said nobody would take you seriously. He doubled that money, gave 2 billion shillings, and in the 3 years to follow, it became 5 billion shillings. And on top of that, the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, that was conceived by His Excellency, our third president, and given to the young people of this country to actually execute it, became the basis on which the Women Development Fund, the Ways of Fund were developed. In fact, when I read the documents, I can speak out sentences that we contributed as the youth of this country and as the first board members. Of course, we quit because at the time we felt like we were used to put in place a very, very robust system that was going to then provide people to steal, and we didn't want to be part of that. And looking back, we should have stayed and fought. But that having been said, he put his words where his thoughts were. He didn't just conceive something and give it to the older people to do. He conceived it and gave it to the young people to do it. And for that, we're very proud. It was our first experience with government, and of which we're very proud, and of which we continue to be proud and to show the results we've achieved for this country during his tenure. Madam Speaker, he saw the people behind the labels. At the time, the youth were called Mungiki, the youth Time Bomb, the youth this and the youth that. He actioned. He put the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, which to date continues to fund some of these things. His principle stands on a lot of things, be it living within your means, be it zero tolerance to corruption, be it not entertaining certain things, or be it actually asking people to take responsibility for their lives. Today, as we go campaigning, we come face to face with people who don't take responsibility for their lives. They probably think that politicians should take care of their lives. But President Mwai Kibaki had such a principled stance against any of these things. He would say, yes, serikali itasaidia, but within the environment within which you work for yourself. That is the mentorship. That is the direction that a leader should give, and he gave it very well. Madam Speaker, we that come from northern Kenya, when we talk of the great north, the big, bold north, which is a dream for most of us who would like to go into leadership to achieve that dream, we will be walking on the great road that His Excellency Mwai Kibaki made. For those and many other things that he has made, and he just quietly achieved them. You would never hear him chest thumping. Right now I've heard people saying that the Jubilee government has brought very bad things. They have done so many things. They have borrowed too much. The Jubilee government, in my mind, the Jubilee government is Uhuru Ruto. We campaigned for Uhuru Ruto. It is not just Uhuru alone. So if there's any responsibility, the two should take responsibility for it, and nobody should apportion blame and take credit at the same time. That cannot be. And so even as we eulogize our third president, who has, as I said, who has created a lot of, who has achieved quite a lot, and who has, in the last 50 years of his service to humanity and his service to the country, has the privilege of public service, but he did justice to it. Because today's public service is a shadow of what it should be. Public service that's supposed to be compassionate, public service that's supposed to really be capable, that is supposed to put in place the capable people, is nothing close to that. We are relying on other measures of public service, but he embodied the public service that is a privilege to serve, the public service that should be delivered with compassion, the public service that should be given to capable people to achieve great things, the public service that believes in action, that achieves results for the most vulnerable of this society. Madam Speaker, as one of the people that achieved the Millennium Development Goal for universal access to education, and is at the primary level, we celebrate our president. We celebrate this country for producing such an outstanding leader. Because right now, with the failure of nerve of leadership, with the crisis of leadership that we experience, today I hope his death and his legacy that is now been revived in his death will remind us, as we aspire to leadership, that we should emulate him. We should walk in his giant feet. Madam Speaker, I know a lot of my colleagues were saying they don't aspire to be president and therefore are asking other people aspiring to be president. Those of us, I cannot rule out aspiring to be a president because I'm following in the footsteps of such giants. And what should stop us from actually aspiring to be president? If we have that canvas, if we have that rubric that has been provided to us by our forefathers, President Kenyatta, President Daniel Arap Moi, President Mwai Kibaki, all of whom have shown us what public service should look like, what selfless service should look like. And therefore, without belaboring too much and without repeating all the good things that have been said, I would like to, on behalf of the people of Isiolo, whose voice we in Parliament are, on behalf of my own family, whose voice we are, on behalf of the people of the Great North, where I come from, I would like to say pole sana to our third president and his family, and look forward to the people of Kenya, because his death is coming at a very opportune time for us to make sure that we emulate him, and that we, as we aspire to greater office, to walk in his footpath, and to then serve this country with diligence, with compassion, with all the capabilities that we have, but more importantly, with love. Rest in peace, our third president, and may God continue to bless this country. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Milgo, Alice Chepkorir.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this chance to also add my voice in mourning this great leader that our country has just lost. The leader was distinguished himself to serve his people and to serve this country diligently. And that is why he's become the longest serving leader, because actually He offered services to his people. He showed honesty. He was very accountable. And he lived true to his sayings that leadership is a privilege to better the lives of others, and it is not an opportunity to satisfy personal greed. I'm sure this long service, if he was like some of the leaders that we've seen around, he would be one of the billionaires that we would be having right now. Madam Speaker, I want to say at this particular time that we are mourning a great leader that actually touched the lives of very many people in this country. And more specifically, as I stand here today as Chair, Standing Committee on Education, I want to really mourn this great icon that turned around education in this country. One, bearing in mind that he knew education is an equalizer between the rich and the poor. And that is why once he brought in the primary education, very many kids were brought back to school, up to and including even the old. That is why we had one old school-going people, Mr. Murage. Unfortunately, he passed on before completing secondary cycle of education. Madam Speaker, the reason why, as an economist, he thought of offering or introducing pre-primary education and later on pre-day secondary education was because of the fact that he knew a country is as good as its education. Because from education, education would provide the skills, the knowledge and competencies to spur development. Madam Speaker, in education, he lived to actually achieve the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which aims to ensure that inclusive, equitable, and quality education that promote lifelong opportunities for all is provided in Kenya. It is my wish, Mr. Speaker, that I hope this government, and maybe more specifically the coming government, would continue to even provide free education up to and including the university. Madam Speaker, once he's provided the free primary education, he went ahead to actually build infrastructure in the entire country. And that is why even in the results that have been released recently, both KCPE and KCSE, it is not uncommon to find that there are students who have done very well from day schools and from very humble backgrounds, Madam Speaker, and this is because of the fact that they can now enjoy learning just like other peoples. Madam Speaker, I want to say that our third president will be remembered for many years because of overturning the economy that was already doing very badly by the time he took office, by actually pulling and introducing things and infrastructure that would go a long way to turn around investments like infrastructure, putting in place very many plans to ensure that economy is turned around. And that is why many of my colleagues have recognized the fact that our borrowing actually reduced during his tenure as a result of providing the proper management. Madam Speaker, I want to say that today we are mourning a great icon who went ahead to actually play a critical role in promulgating the 2010 Constitution that has been known to be one of the most progressive constitutions in the whole world. Madam Speaker, out of this Constitution, I did not only assure that there was the two-tier governments, that is the county governments as well as the national government, but he also ensured, because he knew he was not able to implement, that he put in place a committee that ensured that county governments took root and in this case were properly established. Madam Speaker, county governments have gone a long way to turn around the lives of very many people, particularly in those counties where funds are being managed very well. We've seen a lot of infrastructure. We've seen a life turnaround in terms of businesses in the counties because of the money that has gone all the way up to the villages as a result of this 2010 Constitution, Madam Speaker. In addition, within this 2010 Constitution, Madam Speaker, he remembered to ensure that there was a portion or a section that talked about not more than 2/3 gender rule, which actually spoke to the fact that in all government institutions, and up to and including Parliament, there should be not more than 2/3 of both genders. Madam Speaker, it is unfortunate that today it is still not implemented. It is still a nightmare. Part of the greatest population, that is the 2%, is still left behind. But for this great economist, he knew that 52% of the population is women, and so he ensured that this one here is put in the Constitution. It is my prayer that the coming government will be able to implement fully. Well, I thank this current government, they have tried, but then in some sections, it is not fully implemented. So we thank this great leader for remembering the women, and today we stand here as even being products of that Constitution that actually felt that in cases where the 2/3 gender has not been achieved, we would have affirmative action. Madam Speaker, President Kibaki went ahead to actually oversee the creation of Vision 2030, which has gone to become a blueprint that is a focal point of reference wherever we are talking about any development. And in this case, Madam Speaker, if government will be able to stick to this, I'm sure this government will be turned around, and in a short while, there will be very many developments. Madam Speaker, President Kibaki today, our third president, will go down in record books of history as a great mentor. Many of the leaders that we are seeing today came out of his mentorship. I remember during his time, even the CSS was given the free time, the opportunity to exercise, to use their skills and manage the various ministries in the way they knew. And in this case, he would come back, particularly if anyone messed up, and he would not take it very lightly. That is the reason why, Madam Speaker, we had so many, there is a lot of competition between the different CSS, and very many of them were able to turn around most of the departments in this country, and that went a long way to guide the people of this country. Madam Speaker, President Kibaki will be remembered for turning around very many issues in this country. Madam Speaker, he tied the youths in terms of ensuring that he even brought the boda, that it is my prayer that boda sector will be ordered so that this one will continue to be a well-managed institution, because it has actually assisted our youths. Because as you know, Madam Speaker, right now, 75% of our youths that we are churning out of school every year are not employed. But then the boda sector has actually assisted them. In addition to that one, President Kibaki also ensured that there was money provided not only for the youth, but also for the women to be able to turn around the economy in this country. Madam Speaker, today we are mourning a great icon, a leader that distinguished itself to actually be recognized not only in Kenya, but all over the world as being a no-nonsense president. And if in this case somebody would even emulate his steps and his actions even a quarter away, I'm sure would have even better things going on in the various countries and even in this the region at large. Madam Speaker, I want to say there are many things that our president did. I do not want to even forget to mention CDF. I remember one time when people asked the money as he was writing in some place along Bomet County, people stood to ask him money. And they said, what is the money for? Go back and walk. And then he came back and turned back the money that used to be given out along the roads, Madam Speaker, into CDF. CDF Kitty has done so much. It has changed the lives of people, and we are saying the only thing that is only lacking is the fact that corruption has since gone very high. I think we only need management. Otherwise, you put in place the infrastructure, the very many functions that only needs to be managed. Otherwise, it will go a long way to actually help our people. Madam Speaker, I do not want to go on for a long time. We cannot even, time is not even enough to enumerate many things that this third president of the Republic of Kenya did. I only want to say, on behalf of the people of Bomet County and my family, I want to say apology to the family, apology to the people of Nyeri, and to the people of Kenya at large, and to everyone whose actions of third president of this country touched, and may his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Matsayo Stewart Mochiru.
Asante Bispika kwa kunipa fursa hii. Bispika, kitu cha kwanza nataka niungane na wewe Bispika kwa kupeleka rambirambi zangu, familia na hususan watu wangu wa Kilifi walionipa nafasi hii kuwakilisha ndani ya bunge la Senate. Nataka kupeana rambirambi zangu kwa watu wa Nyeri, Othaya na familia ya mwenda zake marehemu Mwai Kibaki. Bispika, kitu cha maana cha kumkumbuka marehemu ni kwamba marehemu alikuwa mshupavu wa mambo ya kudebate katika bunge, na ni kwa sababu hiyo Bispika, tunaona ya kwamba katika historia ya wanasiasa waliokuwa katika bunge, yeye alikuwa mmoja wao wa kipaumbele, kwa sababu alikuwa ndani ya hili bunge kwa zaidi ya miaka 50. Bispika, wewe na mimi tunaweza kuelewa ya kwamba kuketi kwa hili bunge kwa miaka 50 ni kwamba umechaguliwa mara 10 kuingia hapa ndani ya bunge na wananchi wako. Kwa hiyo nataka kumpatia kongole vile vile kwa mfano wake mzuri sana kuweza kuchaguliwa na watu wake ama wa Kenya kuregeshwa ndani ya bunge kwa miaka kwa kupigiwa kura mihula 10. Ikiwa mhula mmoja ni miaka 5, mihula 10 inakuwa miaka 50. Ambalo ni jambo sisi wengine hatujui kama tunaweza kulifanya hilo, kwa sababu ya ujasiri wake aliweza kufanyiwa hivyo. Bispika, cha kwanza lazima tuzingatie huyu mheshimiwa Mwai Kibaki alikuwa mtu wa aina gani. Bispika, tunaona ya kwamba alikuwa yeye ni mtu alisomea shahada ya uchumi. Bispika, wakati ule akisomea shahada ya uchumi ilikuwa ni watu kidogo sana ambao walikuwa wako na hizi shahada, na yeye katika ulimwengu alikuwa mmoja wapo aliyetambuliwa kwamba yeye taaluma yake aliyonayo ya uchumi inaweza kumfanya akawa kiongozi ama akaweza kusaidia ile nchi ambayo ametoka. Bispika, tunakumbuka katika hali hiyo hiyo ya uchumi alipochukua hatama ya uongozi, mabanki yalifungua milango, watu walikuwa wakiitwa kuenda kuchukua pesa. Lakini tunaona kabla yeye ilikuwa pia kupata loan ni vigumu. Baada ya yeye tumerudi pale pale, kupata loan ni vigumu, ama kupata pesa kutoka kwa manyumba ya pesa, bank zile ni vigumu. Lakini jambo la kushangaza ni kwamba wakati wa Kibaki hata kwa magazeti walikuwa wanachapisha, wanasema kama una haja na pesa kuja uchukue. Nakumbuka wakati huo economy ilikuwa nzuri kwa sababu watu waliweza kujifaidisha ama kujinufaisha kwa kuchukua mikopo, kwa sababu uchumi ulikuwa bora, watu waliweza kuendelea. Speaker, nataka kuja tu kusema kwamba mimi mwenyewe nilifanya kazi na Kibaki kwa muda wa miaka 3. Tulifanya kazi karibu sana na yeye. Nikisema hivyo ni kwa sababu mimi nilipokuwa chaguliwa kama mwenyekiti wa shirika la ukulima katika Kenya, Kibaki ndio aliweza kuingia ndani akawa rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya. Na ni wakati huo ndio tulikutana wakati wa maonyesho ya ukulima yanayofanywa katika Kenya yetu kila mahali. Kwa hiyo tulizunguka na yeye, mimi nikiwa kama mwenyekiti wa shirika la wakulima na yeye akiwa rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya na patron kilele cha wakulima wa Kenya. Ikiwa yeye akiwa kama patron, ilikuwa inabidi yeye wakati wote tukiwa na show za kitaifa za ukulima, yeye ni lazima aje aweze kufungua ile maonyesho kirasmi. Kwa hiyo Speaker, nikisema hivyo ni mtu ambaye nilikuwa karibu sana, kwa sababu mimi nakumbuka tulikuwa tukipanda kwa ile gari pamoja, ile inaitwa nafikiria ilikuwa ni Commander in Chief CNC. Hiyo ndio gari tulikuwa tunapanda kila wakati wote tukiwa na yeye, tukizunguka katika zile show akiweza kufungua maonyesho ya wakulima. Kwa hiyo Speaker, ni wakati huo niliweza kuwa karibu na yeye na nikamjua ni mtu wa aina gani. Ni mtu alikuwa akipenda nchi yake, na ni mtu ambaye aliona ya kwamba lazima wakulima wasaidiwe. Na ni wakati wake, nakumbuka kama kuna mbolea ilishuka chini ikawa katika bei ambayo inaweza kununuliwa na wananchi wakulima, na wakaweza kulima na mazao yakapatikana. Wakati wa Kibaki kulikuwa hakuna njaa, kulikuwa hakuna bala njaa vile watu wanakufa namna hii siku hizi, kwa sababu yeye alifungua huo uchumi na alafu akaweza kuwapatia wakulima fertilizers ama hizi mbolea na kwa bei nafuu, ili waweze kuweka mambo ya ukulima upande wa mbele na nchi iwe na chakula cha kutosha. Speaker, nataka kukumalizia tu kusema ya kwamba wakati wote serikali ilikuwa ikifikiria habari ya kutengeza mambo ya barabara katika pwani, ilikuwa inafikiria watalii, haikufikiria watu wa pwani. Lakini tunaona kwamba wakati tu yeye alipochukua hatama ya uongozi wa nchi hii, alisema kuna watu wa pwani na wanahitaji kutengezewa barabara, ili kwa sababu kama kuna wakulima waweze kufika katika marikiti ama zile mazao yao wanaweza kuwapeleka katika masoko kuweza kuuza kabla zile bidhaa zao kuharibika. Kuna barabara moja ambayo tutaweza kumkumbuka ya kutoka pande za Malindi kuja mpaka Mombasa. Barabara hiyo ilipanuliwa na iliweza kusaidia watu wengi sana. Tukiangalia upande wa elimu, kwa mara ya kwanza tulikuwa tunafikiria haiwezekani kwamba watoto wanaweza kwenda skuli bila kulipa fee. Lakini ilikuja katokea maajabu ya kwamba wakati uchumi ukiwa bora, mambo mengi yanaweza kutengezeka. Na wakati huo ndio tunasema ya kwamba Kibaki alionyesha mfano wa uongozi. Ukiwa kama kiongozi wa taifa unaweza kufanya mambo namna gani. Na ndio tunaona sababu kulikuwa na watoto waliweza kwenda skuli wakiwa hawatalipa hata karo. Kwa hiyo tunaweza kumshukuru kwa hiyo. Speaker, nataka niweze kuachilia hapa. Kuna mengi ya kusema kwa mwenda zake. Kuna mengi watu watakumbuka kwa mwenda zake. Na sisi kama binadamu tuliobaki nyuma, sisi kama wale ambao tunaweza kusema ya kwamba ni viongozi katika hii nchi, tuige mfano wa marehemu Emilio Mwai Kibaki. Nataka kuambia kwamba wale watoto wake waliobaki nyuma waweze kushikilia familia. Letu litakuwa tu ni kuomba Mungu awajaze na imani wakati huu, na sisi tutazidi kuwaombea kwamba Mungu awapatie mwelekeo na waweze kuepukana na mtihani kama huu, ili wapate nguvu wao na wajukuu waweze kuwa na maisha bora mbeleni. Speaker, la mwisho ni kwamba ufisadi ulikuwa hauko katika orodha yake, na hivyo ni kwamba wakati wake alipokuwa yuko pale kulikuwa ufisadi umerudi chini sana, na hivi sasa tunaona ufisadi umechipuka zaidi. Kwa hiyo tunaomba ya kwamba ikiwa kuna kitu chochote tunaweza kuiga, tuige mwenendo wa Rais Mwai Kibaki mwenda zake, ya kwamba ikiwa yeye alikuwa hataki ufisadi, basi tunaona ya kwamba hivi sasa tunaelekea mambo ya uchaguzi, na tunaona ya kwamba katika huu uchaguzi tukishofanya kutakuwa na rais. Tunamjua atakayekuwa rais sisi. Siwezi kusema ni nani, lakini tunajua yule rais wangu ndio atakuwa rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya. Na kwa hiyo tunasema ya kwamba ikiwa yeye ndio atakuwa rais, tuna imani ya kwamba yeye ataweza pia kuiga mfano wa Kibaki, kwa sababu alikuwa pamoja katika serikali ya nusu mkate, na hivi sasa yeye akiwa ataenda kuongoza hiyo nchi, kuongoza hii nchi yetu, basi jambo la kwanza la kufanya yeye kama rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya apigane na ufisadi kama vile Mwai Kibaki alipigana na ufisadi. Asante Mr. Speaker.
Wachila yako.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to join colleagues in the Senate